Chapter 5240. Tang Jiyan was the daughter of Minister Tang's younger brother. Her father went missing many years ago when he went to the capital to transport goods. There was no news of him until now. There were rumors that he died in the hands of bandits. His wife heard the news and passed away soon after. When Tang Jiyan was 10 years old, she was brought to Minister Tang's house and lived there for 4 years. It was the year she came. Her poor and pitiful appearance was deeply engraved in Mu Shanji's mind and he could not erase it. Mother Mu tried to persuade Mu Shanji to give up the idea. Tang Jiyan was engaged since she was young. It was not something he could think of. She was going to get married in a year. Mu Shanji also knew this. He was very upset, but there was nothing he could do. Mother Mu thought that it was fine whether Mu Shanji agreed or not. Now she hoped that this matter could be settled so that Mu Shanji could forget Tang Jiyan as soon as possible, so that there would be no trouble in the future. However, before Mu Shanji could think about it, something happened at home. It was all because Mu Mu's mother had a conflict with the villagers. She had a weak body, so she fell and hurt her waist. Mu Shanji was furious when he came back. He picked up a stick and went to the family to beat them up. However, the family was not to be trifled with. They filed a complaint against Mu Shanji. Mother Mu fell on her own accord. Everyone in the village witnessed Mu Shanji beating the family, so it was a lawsuit with no chance of winning. What awaited Mu Shanji was jail time and a huge amount of compensation, unless the family was willing to negotiate and settle it privately. The villagers did not help them because they were outsiders and did not have a close relationship with the villagers. They would not allow outsiders to bully them. Mu Shanji's mother sold everything in the house that should be sold. She went to the family to plead for mercy. Unfortunately, most of the money that Mu Shanji received was used to buy books and medicine for her. The money that they collected was less than 10 taels. How could the family agree? They insisted that Mu Shanji go to jail. Mother Mu could not let Mu Shanji go to jail. In a hurry, she thought of Minister Tang, so she quickly ran to Minister Tang's house and asked him for help. Minister Tang heard the ins and outs of the matter and decided to help Mu Shanji. With his status, he went to negotiate and even sent a sum of money as compensation. That family didn't make things difficult for him and agreed to settle the matter privately. Mu Shanji was spared from prison because he owed Father Tang a huge favor. Later, Mother Mu persuaded him to agree to Minister Tang's request and marry the original owner of the body. He promised to take good care of her for the rest of his life. Then, there was the wedding scene today. After the wedding, nothing happened between Mu Shanji and the original host. It was only because Mu Shanji bumped into Tang Jiyan on his way to the bridal chamber. Looking at her resentful eyes, he panicked and regretted his impulsive decision to agree to the marriage. Tang Jiyan had always been a strong woman. She rarely showed her weak side in front of others. However, on his wedding night, under the dim light, he could see that her eyes were red. She was probably crying secretly. On the way to the bridal chamber, whenever he thought of Tang Jiyan's appearance, his heart would ache. It was very painful, but it was too late for regrets. Even if he regretted it, it was impossible between them. Tang Jiyan was going to get married next year. There seemed to be an uncrossable river between them. After the wedding, Mu Shanji performed well and gradually gained Minister Tang's trust. Except for not consummating with the original host, everything seemed to be perfect. Chapter 5241. Mu Shanji didn't want Minister Tang to think too much, so he pretended to consummate the marriage on the night of the wedding. After Minister Tang trusted him, he learned how to manage the family business from him. However, Tang Jiyan always appeared in his sight. Even if he tried to control himself, he would still look at her when no one was looking. It was the same for Tang Jiyan. They had feelings for each other, but they couldn't be together. It was undoubtedly torture for them. Tang Xian's father also left behind a lot of family business. When they were young, Minister Tang took care of it on behalf of him. Later, it was gradually handed over to her. Now, Tang Xian took care of it herself. Therefore, they met a lot. After a lot of contact, it was inevitable that they would have some private time. They even had some physical contact and crossed the line verbally. The relationship between the two of them went from avoiding each other to wishing that the sun would rise earlier every day so that they could meet each other. Later on, they would even create some private space, but their excuse was to discuss business. Occasionally, they would bring the original owner to deceive others. The original owner was different from normal people. She wasn't smart enough and didn't know anything about men and women. How could she find out anything when she was deceived by two smart people? Mu Shanji and Tang Xian maintained this relationship until a year later, when Tang Xian got married. Although both of them didn't want this result, they couldn't go back on their words. Tang Xian still got married under Mu Shanji's agony. He had already stopped, but Tang Xian came back less than half a year after she got married. She came back as a husband with all her husband's property. Later, he found out that her husband was in poor health. After she got married, he didn't even have the strength to consummate the marriage. He was also the only child. His parents died early, and he only had an old lady. After his death, the old lady was gone, and she was in charge. She wasn't familiar with that place, so she came back with all the property. It was inconvenient for her to live with her father, so she bought a house and lived in a more remote and quiet place. In order to see Mu Shanji, she often used the excuse of seeing Tang Gua to come to the mansion. The flame that had been extinguished between the two of them gradually rose again. In the end, they couldn't control it and something that shouldn't have happened. Moreover, it couldn't be stopped. That kind of relationship continued. Only Mu Shanji's mother knew about the changes in Mu Shanji. At first, she was shocked. She couldn't bear to see Mu Shan in pain. Later, she helped him hide it and covered for him. She even went to Tang Xian's place in person. No one suspected anything. The original owner was a fool and everyone had deceived her. How could she know what was going on behind the scenes? Moreover, Mu Feiqi's mother had married the original Mu Qiqi in Mu Shanji and worked in the minister's mansion, so it was easy to hide it from Minister Tang. Mu Shanji had always been very careful. Even after Squire Tang's death, he still hadn't discovered this. Squire Tang's death was an accident. She didn't know where the trouble came from. That day outside the Mushan Mountains, a group of bandits rushed into her mansion and killed everyone they saw. Squire Tang heard the noise outside and knew that they might not be able to escape, so he asked Honor to take Tang Gua and escape through the small door. There was a carriage at the small door. If they were lucky, they should be able to escape with their lives. The original Mu Qiqi was taken to the carriage in a daze. Honor urged the coachman to go quickly. But at the critical moment, the original Mu Qiqi thought of Mu Shanji. She didn't know why, but her mind seemed to be suddenly clear. She quickly asked the coachman to change the direction and go to find Mu Shanji. She was afraid that the bandits would catch up with them, so she asked Honor to take the coachman to find Mu Shanji. But Honor didn't want to and wanted to follow her, so the coachman drove the carriage. The original Mu Qiqi and Honor were killed by the bandits who chased after them. Mu Shanji escaped in time and survived. He took care of the affairs of the minister's mansion and sold his family property. In order to escape, he took Tang Xian and Mu Feiqi's mother far away. Later, he found the mystery of his identity and recovered his identity. He went through the difficulties hand in hand with Tang Xian. In the end, the two lovers got married. Chapter 52-42. The red candles in the room were crying. Mu Shanji, who was dealing with the guests outside, was already half drunk. He was being supported by the servants to the bridal chamber. When passing through the long corridor, the half-drunk Mu Shanji saw Tang Jiyan, who stopped to make way for him. At that moment, all his drunkenness disappeared. Tang Jiyan was standing there alone, but he couldn't stop in front of her. He could only pass by her with the help of the servants. He couldn't help but look at her. The light was dim, but he could see that Tang Jiyan was sad at this time. Her eyes were red. She must have just cried. Mu Shanji was full of regret. He regretted that he agreed to this marriage. Unfortunately, after the ceremony and the wine, he was going to the bridal chamber. At this time, he was already the son-in-law of Minister Tang. It was impossible for him and Tang Jiyan to be together. No one noticed the moment when Tang Jiyan and Mu Shanji looked at each other with longing and reluctance. In the eyes of the servants. In the servants' eyes, Tang Jiyan made way for Mu Shanji as the groom. After all, they had to walk through the long corridor. Mu Shanji came to the bridal chamber with heartache. Looking at the room full of red candles and the burning red candles, there was no joy in his heart. Under the guidance of the servant girl, he finished all the necessary procedures. Only Tang Gua and Mu Shanji were left in the room. Brother Shanji. Tang Gua saw Mu Shanji in a daze. She called him according to the tone of the original owner. Her tone was a bit dull, but it was obvious that the owner of the voice should be very fond of this person. Mu Shanji was indeed awakened. He looked at Tang Gua, who was sitting obediently by the bed. Seeing her clear eyes, he suddenly felt guilty. He only felt very confused, but he still forced a smile. He reached out and touched Tang Gua's head. Then he pulled her to the table and pointed at the candied fruits on the table. Gua, are you hungry? If you are hungry, eat something. You can rest after eating. I am a little hungry. Tang Gua didn't refuse. The original owner did this. She sat on the stool and ate something. She glanced at Mu Shanji, who was still in a dilemma. Then, she saw Mu Shanji staring at the bed. He bit his finger and dripped a few drops of blood on it. Then, he quickly spread out the quilt like a thief. Is it good? After finishing what he wanted to do, Mu Shanji came to Tang Gua's side and sat on another stool. Eat more if you like. If it's not enough, I'll ask someone to get more. Tang Gua nodded gently. She thought to herself, Mu Shanji is really impolite. Does he think he's the owner of this place? He entertained her as if he was entertaining a guest. For the time being, she did not care too much about it. This body was indeed a little hungry, so she had to hurry up and eat something. When Tang Gua finished eating, Mu Shanji coaxed her to sleep. He covered each of them with a quilt. He whispered to Tang Gua, Gua, let's keep a secret, okay? Secret? Yes, a secret. Mu Shanji turned sideways and said seriously, it's a secret between us. I won't tell anyone, not even my father-in-law. Only you and I know, yes, a secret that only you and I know. Mu Shanji repeated and then said, from now on, we are husband and wife. We are the closest people in this world, so we have to keep this a secret. In the future, no matter who asks, even my father-in-law, you can't tell them what happened in the room. Chapter 52-43. Tang Gua blinked and pondered. She didn't seem to understand, but at the same time, she seemed to understand. Finally, she spat out two words, sure. Because the original owner was mentally handicapped, Minister Tang didn't ask anyone to teach her some of the necessary procedures. In Minister Tang's opinion, Mu Shanji was a good person. He had been good to Tang Gua since they were young. He was going to marry Tang Gua, so he could teach her in this aspect. After all, the original owner wasn't a normal person. He was really afraid that if someone else taught her, it would scare her and leave a psychological shadow. Hearing Tanggua's answer, Mu Shanji was relieved. Yes, sure. It's sure to tell others, so you can't tell anyone. In the future, if anyone asks about what happened in the room, don't tell them. You have to keep it a secret. A secret. Tanggua pretended to remember this word and then nodded heavily. Keep it a secret. It's Brother Shanji's secret. Mu Shanji was finally relieved. At this moment, he felt a little guilty. He used Tanggua's trust to make her do this. He dared to do it because he knew the original owner. She listened to him very much. She had been like this for a long time. As long as she listened to him, she wouldn't tell anyone about this matter. He already had Tang Jian in his heart. He really couldn't accept another person at the moment. Perhaps after a long time, his feelings for Tang Jian would slowly fade and he would start over with Tanggua. Mu Shanji thought so and said, "You're tired today. Go to sleep. I'll take you there tomorrow." Tanggua closed her eyes and went to sleep. In fact, she entered the group to tell the story of this world to her friends. She didn't have time to care about Mu Shanji's entanglement. This person actually had someone in his heart. How could he have the nerve to agree to this matter? It was done, but he couldn't accept it. In the end, Mu Shanji couldn't resist the temptation. He was a bit of a bitch. "Margaret, whoa, I'm not in it again. I know that the creator of the world has never stopped targeting me. Shengguan Yonggu, I feel like I'm also targeted by the heavenly Tao. Since I fell into that secret realm, one strange world followed another. It was simply endless. It wasn't easy to get out of a place where yin and yang were reversed, but in the end, we still couldn't get out." Marguerite was no longer sad. "Margaret, where are you? What strange things have happened this time?" "Shengguan Yungu, it's a place without light. It's dark everywhere. All humans live underground. As for what exactly was going on, he would have to investigate it later. He had just arrived, so he had not figured it out yet." "Margaret, what an unlucky child. Do you want me to say a few words of blessing to you?" "Shengguan Yonggu, Senior Margaret knows how to give blessings. Will it become a curse's curse?" He was worried. Margaret, no wonder she to say the words to say. After confirming that everyone in the group was fine, Tanggua chatted with them. After watching them play for a while, she left and went to sleep, to the S to the end. T to be 8, to T to say to him to be a T to have a normal T halves. F. She. Since things had come to this, there was no other way. He could only continue down this path. Mu Shanji couldn't sleep for the whole night. Every time he closed his eyes, he would think of Tang Jian, whom he saw in the corridor. When he finally fell asleep, he would dream of Tang Jian crying sadly in his arms. Chapter 52-44. Tanggua had a good night's sleep. When she woke up, she saw that Mu Shanji had dark circles under his eyes. Obviously, he didn't sleep well. She shouted to the outside, "Han air, Han air." Han air quickly came in with some maids with water. She helped Tanggua dress, and some maids helped Mu Shanji dress. Mu Shanji was still a little uncomfortable, but because he didn't sleep well, he was not in good spirits. So, he asked the maids to help him. If it was in normal times, he would definitely refuse. He did it himself, and he really didn't have the energy to fight for this. Han air helped Tanggua dress, wash up, and then dress up. She whispered in her ear, "Miss, did you rest well last night? Are you tired?" She had seen the old maid tidying up the bed just now, so she asked. Tang Guo looked at herself in the mirror. She was very satisfied with her appearance. After a while, she answered Han Er word by word, "It's a secret." Han Er was stunned. "A secret?" She asked in a low voice about last night's situation. Unexpectedly, Tang Guo answered, "I can't tell you." Han Er understood immediately. She nodded with a smile and didn't ask more. It seemed that Miss was not bullied. So, other things were not important. She dressed Tang Guo. Next, Tang Guo and Mu Shanji went to see Minister Tang. In the hall, Mu Shanji saw Tang Jian. Tang Jian stood quietly aside. She looked well-behaved. She only glanced at Mu Shanji and then lowered her head slightly, as if it had nothing to do with her. Mu Shanji also glanced at her hurriedly and quickly looked away. He continued the process of the second day of the wedding, bowing to his father-in-law and toasting. After the process was over, the whole family sat together for breakfast. There were 4 people at the table: Minister Tang, Tang Guo, Mu Shanji, and Tang Jian. Tang Guo was the happiest person at this meal. Seeing that she was fine and looked good, Minister Tang stroked his beard with satisfaction. "Guo, eat more if you like. My appetite this morning is better than before." Tang Guo looked up and nodded at Minister Tang with a big smile. She glanced at the table and picked up some food for Minister Tang. Squire Tang laughed happily and immediately ate the money that Tang Guo gave him with a smile. Even if his daughter was a little mentally handicapped, she knew how to call him daddy and doted on him. That was enough. This huge family business was enough for his daughter to live a happy life. Tang Guo didn't forget about Mu Shanji either. After all, she had to maintain her character and act as a silly girl who only cared about Mu Shanji. She picked up some food for Mu Shanji. Mu Shanji suddenly felt a great pressure. He saw Tang Jian looking at him with a smile. He saw Tang Jian trembling slightly and pursing her lips. He only felt that the food in his bowl was a hot potato. He knew that if he ate it, he would hurt Tang Jian's heart. But at this moment, he had no choice but to eat. Tang Guo saw Mu Shanji eat it and give him more money. She saw that Tang Jian was uncomfortable and almost couldn't maintain her character. She directly rolled her eyes. She found that Mu Shanji was eating with difficulty and maintaining a smile on his face. He looked happy, but in fact, his hands were clenched into fists under the table and were trembling slightly. If he liked her so much, why did he agree to marry her? These people, she really didn't understand. They were so greedy and wanted everything. Tang Guo kept picking up food for Mu Shanji in the morning. He ate until he was full. Peak. Chapter 52-45. It was good food, but because Tang Jian was watching, he couldn't taste it at all. Minister Tang ate more happily. Tang Guo also put food in his bowl several times, which were all his favorites. Mu Shanji knew it was dangerous for him to go down, so he decided to see Tang Jian less. Tang Jian was going to get married a year later. It was impossible for them to be together, so it was better for everyone to see each other less. After breakfast, he took Tang Guo out to play. When Tang Guo was done playing, he went back to his room to read. Minister Tang was indeed a good person. Seeing that Mu Shanji liked to read so much, he asked the servants to clean up a room for Mu Shanji's study. He also asked the servants to copy many books and put them in the room. In this way, except for meals, Mu Shanji basically didn't see Tang Jian. His mind was filled with books, so he didn't think about it for the time being. Finally, he felt less sad. Tang Jian was also avoiding meeting Mu Shanji. Now that she had taken over her father's business, she had to go out every day to look after the shops and check the accounts. She was so busy that she didn't even have time to eat in the mansion. The only one who was more comfortable was Tangua. Mushanji had nothing to do with her, so she didn't have to do anything. She ate and drank all day, and asked the system to monitor the mansion to understand the situation. Other than that, there was nothing else to do. Mushanji's mother had been arranged to work in the mansion. At this time, she had become close with some servants. Because of her identity, the servants in the mansion were very obedient to her. She had observed Mushanji's mother's means. She was indeed not an ordinary person. She was very skilled in managing people, and she definitely had seen a lot of things. She was very calm when she saw those gold, silver, and jade in front of her, and there was no greed in her eyes. Mushanji's mother fled to Wuxian County with Mushanji. The massacre of the Tang family was also implicated by this mother and son pair. There were still some years before that incident, so there was no need to rush. She needed to let Minister Tang know in advance that Mushanji was not as good as he thought. She was a fool now, so she could only use a fool's way to let her father know. It would be troublesome to become smart all of a sudden. It would easily arouse suspicion and jealousy. The people here were not fools. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. Mushanji's performance made Minister Tang very satisfied. One day, after playing with Tangguo for a while, he was about to go to the study to read when he was stopped by Minister Tang's men. After he went there, he realized that Minister Tang wanted him to learn from him. "Father-in-law, the family business in my hands will be handed over to you and Guo, sooner or later. Guo can't do these things. I also hope that she can live a carefree life. You can only worry about these things." This time, Mushanji did not refuse. He still preferred to be busy. Whenever he was free, Tang Guo would pester him to play. If it wasn't flying a kite, it would be playing hide and seek. It was really boring for a normal person to do these things with a fool every day. Therefore, Mushanji spent most of his time learning how to manage the family business from Squire Tang. The original owner was actually very easy to coax. As long as he patiently said a few words to her, she would be very obedient and play with the maids by herself. She would not cause trouble for anyone. Mushanji coaxed Tangguo in this way. Tangguo agreed obediently according to the original owner's temperament. While learning from Minister Tang, Mushanji and Tang Jian spent more time together. The seedling that had sprouted could not be extinguished. Chapter 52-46. Mushanji was indeed very smart. Under Squire Tang's guidance, he could draw inferences about other things. Squire Tang felt that he had picked up a treasure, so he trained him even more and gave him more power. After 2 months of learning, Mushanji handled some things by himself. Squire Tang didn't follow him anymore. Tangguo didn't interfere with anything for the time being. If she didn't give the two a chance to cheat, how could she get hold of them? If her father knew that there was something going on between them, everything would be nipped in the bud. How boring would that be? By then, with her father's love for his daughter, he would most likely kick Mushanji out of the house. Then, it would have nothing to do with them. When Tang Jian became a widow, they would have a chance to be together openly. And now that Mushanji had learned so much, he might be able to start a new life after being kicked out. Even if she didn't have the capital, Tang Jian did. Who could say anything about that? Even if her father felt uncomfortable, he wouldn't pursue the past for the sake of Tang Jian's father. Tangguo looked at Squire Tang and handed more things to Mushanji. In just half a year, he didn't care much about things. He just didn't check the account book for 3 months. He was retired and spent more time at home playing with Tangguo. "Father, the kite is flying so high." Tangguo was flying a kite with Squire Tang. She couldn't help it. The original owner loved flying kites. When her father was free, he would fly a kite with her every day. He even made all kinds of kites himself. Not only that, he would take her to the street to buy small things every day. System, host, I feel that you are being forced to open your business. Tangguo, what do you want to say? I want to say that you still have to endure. Endure until Tang Jiyan gets married and becomes a widow. Then, the two of them will hook up. That's the end. Tangguo, if you didn't mention this, I would have forgotten. Give me the information of Tang Jiyan's fiancé. Although it's ancient times and there's no internet, according to the information we have, you should be able to cover that area, right? System, that's not a problem, but it will take a long time. It's okay, I'm not in a hurry. You just need to see what kind of illness he has and how he is. If he's not a scourge, I'll do a good deed and save his life. Tangguo sat at the side, eating snacks. Seeing her father flying a kite for her, a smile unknowingly overflowed. But living a long life isn't necessarily a good thing. He has to wear a green hat. System, dear host, have you forgotten that you are wearing a hat of this color? Tangguo, system, dear host, I'll go investigate that matter first. As soon as the system finished speaking, it slipped away. He also felt that he was floating, so he quickly slipped away when the host wasn't paying attention. He didn't want her to come back to her senses and say that she was his number again. This was the pain of his birth. After the system slipped away, Tangguo continued to fly the kite. Since her father liked to play, she would let him play. He would take good care of his body so that he would not be angered in the future. Counselor Tang was especially satisfied recently. He felt that this was the happiest moment in his life. It was a pity that his late wife couldn't see all of this. However, he didn't know that at this moment, Mu Shanji and Tang Jiyan were sitting in a private room of a tea house, talking. The two looked at each other with eyes full of affection. After a moment of silence, Mu Shanji spoke first. Don't be too tired. You look like you've lost a lot of weight. Peak. Chapter 52-47. Tang Jiyan could still pretend to be strong. Even if she met Mu Shanji every day, as long as he didn't speak, she could pretend that she didn't know anything and try to forget that feeling. Unexpectedly, the boss left early today, and they had a chance to be alone. Mu Shanji took the initiative to talk to her, and asked her to take care of herself. This sentence instantly broke all of her strength. Endless grievances rose in her heart, and her eyes became red, containing the tears that she tried hard not to let fall. Seeing this, Mu Shanji's heart also tightened. He couldn't be indifferent to Tang Jiyan's appearance. In the end, he helped her wipe her tears. I'm sorry. Mu Shanji said softly, it's just that we're not meant to be together. Everything hasn't happened yet. Why can't we change our fate? Tang Jiyan said angrily. If Mu Shanji had the courage, she would have broken off the engagement. Even if she was scolded by her uncle and looked down upon by the world, as long as Mu Shanji dared, she dared. However, Mu Shanji had never shown that. He always revealed that there was an insurmountable gap between them. They were meant to be together, but not meant to be together. She hated to hear such words the most. She felt inexplicably wronged. The more Tang Jiyan thought about it, the more she couldn't help but wipe her tears. Mu Shanji panicked and hurriedly wiped her tears. What's wrong? Have you encountered any difficulties recently? Tell me. If I can help you, I'll definitely do so. Tang Jiyan looked at him with tears in her eyes, feeling even more wronged. She was sad here, but he didn't know what was going on. This person had never thought that there might be a future between them. At this point, there was really no chance between them. There was no need for her to say so much to him. "I'll go first." Tang Jian wiped her tears and pretended that sand had gotten into her eyes. She left Mu Shanji behind her. Mu Shanji wanted to chase after her, but Tang Jian had already walked out of the door. He was afraid that if he got too close, he would be seen by others, so he watched her leave. Tang Jian felt it and looked back at him with a sad smile. Mu Shanji's heart tightened, and he really wanted to chase after her. For the next few days, Mu Shanji met Tang Jian. Tang Jian didn't say a word to him except for the necessary words. Her attitude was cold and indifferent, which made him very uncomfortable. Mu Shanji couldn't accept this, so he took the initiative to create an opportunity to be alone with Tang Jian again. Tang Jian wanted to leave, but this time he quickly stopped her. Tang Jian struggled and tried to leave. Mu Shanji pulled her back and hugged her tightly. She couldn't get away. "What's wrong with you? Why have you been ignoring me for the past few days?" Mu Shanji did not like Tang Jian when she was like this. He was also afraid that she would treat him like a stranger. Tang Jian sneered, "How do you want me to pay attention to you? You are now my cousin-in-law. How do you want me to pay attention to you?" Mu Shanji opened his mouth, but he couldn't refute. "Mu Shanji, let me go. Since you know that there's no future between us, why are you blocking my way? In half a year, I will be getting married. If someone sees us like this, it won't be as simple as gossip. Your reputation and mine will be ruined." Mu Shanji didn't let her go this time. He said firmly, "I've already made arrangements. No one will find out." The top. Chapter 52-48. You've been ignoring me recently. You're even more indifferent than when we first met. I feel very uneasy if I don't figure out what's going on. Jian, what's wrong with you? Why don't you tell me what's going on? Tang Jian didn't struggle anymore. Her voice was still sarcastic. She looked at Mu Shanji and said, "So what if I tell you? Will our relationship change?" Mu Shanji, it was the best chance for us to change everything, but you never thought about it. How can I not be sad? Since Mu Shanji said so, Tang Jian couldn't hold it in anymore. At that time, you were still Mu Shanji, not the son-in-law of the Tang family. I was only engaged, but not married. If you told me that you're willing to be with me, can't we be together? At most, our reputation will be damaged, but we can still be together. But you didn't think about it at all. You gave up on our relationship and chose my silly sister Tang. You obviously didn't have any feelings for her, but you still accepted my uncle's proposal to marry her and become the son-in-law of the Tang family. It's fine if you act like this, but I can clearly see your feelings for me from your eyes. Look at me, I'm full of regret and reluctance. Why? You've already made your choice. Why did you show me such an expression to disturb my mood? You know that I can't turn a blind eye to these things. I'll be moved and hope will be born. But if we really do something, what will happen between us? Tang Jian's words made Mu Shanji speechless. He really regretted it. But what Tang Jian said, even if it was reversed, he still felt that it was a little inappropriate. If they couldn't get one, their reputation would be ruined. There would be no place for them in Wuxian County in the future. His mother would also be implicated. He regretted that he couldn't be with Tang Jian. Only then did he realize that his heart was filled with her. He could only apologize. Tang Jian pushed him away this time, and he didn't stop her. However, in the future, he secretly treated Tang Jian well. He trained his confidant, who was a servant he bought by accident, to help him do some trivial things. He had arranged for this confidant to take care of Tang Jian's affairs. Despite her stubbornness, Tang Jian accepted Mu Shanji's kindness and her attitude gradually softened. Tang Guo often received the system telling her about the two's behavior. At this time, the two did not do anything excessive. At most, they looked at each other affectionately. Occasionally, when Tang Guo was sad, Mu Shanji would wipe her tears. System: Dear host, the information on Tang Xian's fiancé has been investigated. Do you want to see it now? This person wasn't a bad person. Rather, he was a little unlucky. His illness was from his mother's womb. This kind of illness, let alone in the ancient world, even in the modern world, if not properly recuperated, it would be fatal. As for his character, there's no problem. This person doesn't usually go out. It's just that his body is too weak, so it's even less likely for him to do evil. He's a relatively simple person. Got it. In that case, I'll find an opportunity to save his life. However, his existence cannot prevent those two from rekindling their old flame. Tang Guo was eating snacks. Squire Tang had been asking people to study these things when he was free. Vertex. Chapter 52-49. In the evening, Mu Shanji came back. As usual, Tang Guo followed the original owner's character and waited for him at the gate. Her eyesight was very good. She saw with her own eyes that after Mu Shanji saw her, his smile disappeared, and his expression became serious, as if something big had happened. Because he had mended his relationship with Tang Xian these days, he really didn't want to deal with Tang Guo anymore. Grab and seize. He found that as long as he looked serious, dignified and busy, Tang Guo wouldn't disturb him, as if she knew he had something important to do. In order not to deal with Tang Guo, he often showed this expression in front of Tang Guo. Tang Guo imitated the appearance of the original owner so well that no one could see the disdain in her heart. As time went by, Mu Shanji became more and more perfunctory. This person purely took advantage of the original owner's kindness to achieve his own purpose. He was willing to get married, but now he didn't want to deal with her. He probably thought she was annoying in his heart. Brother Shanji, are you hungry? Tang Guo's expression was still the same as before. No one could tell that there was something wrong with her. Her tone was sweet. Mu Shanji looked tired and nodded to Tang Guo. Delicious food. Tang Guo said and trotted in, happily leading the way for him. Mu Shanji also followed in. At first, he felt guilty when he did this once or twice, but he gradually got used to it. He secretly swore in his heart that although he couldn't give Tang Guo love, he would definitely make her carefree for the rest of her life. He would win the literature prize. Thinking of this, the guilt in his heart lessened even more. He felt that as long as Tang Guo's life was smooth and safe, he would complete the task he promised Minister Tang. Mu Shanji kept hinting to himself and imagining. At this time, he didn't feel guilty at all. Instead, he felt that sometimes Tang Guo was a little annoying. Tang Guo felt it, but she was an idiot with a mental defect now. She shouldn't feel it, so she had to pretend nothing happened. At the dining table, she kept putting food on Mu Shanji's plate. Her face was full of smiles, as if she never knew how to be sad. This made Mu Shanji feel a wave of irritation. Because Minister Tang was also there, he ate all the food in the bowl. The corners of Tang Guo's mouth curled up as she continued to fill Mu Shanji's bowl with food. Soon, his bowl was full again. Since she knew that he was feeling uncomfortable, she would try her best to make him feel uncomfortable as well. This person was really strange and changed very quickly. After all, he was still a heartless person. When the original owner was in danger, she suddenly became sober. The first thing she thought of was to tell him to escape. As for him, he managed to escape with his life. Later on, after he regained his identity, he gave up on avenging the dozens of people of the Tang clan for various reasons. Mu Shanji was an ungrateful wretch. It was just that he didn't show it on his face. Brother Shanji, eat. Tang Guo not only put food in his bowl, but also said something to attract his and Minister Tang's attention. Minister Tang was happy to see this, but Mu Shanji didn't dare to show his emotions. He had to pretend to eat happily, but in fact, he was very uncomfortable. He still felt that Tang Guo was a little annoying. Chapter 52-50. When the two returned to the room, there was no one else in the room. Mu Shanji was finally relieved. Brother Shanji. Tang Guo looked at Mu Shanji with a smile. Mu Shanji was very annoyed by her ignorant look. He couldn't help but think of Tang Jiyan, who was very sensible at a very young age. He couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Even though Tang Guo was a fool, she was pampered since she was young. But Jiyan was different. Her mother also died early. Her father was always busy and seldom at home. She was very lonely at a young age. When she was older, her father had an accident. She didn't even see his body. She had to live under someone else's roof. Now she had to take care of all the businesses by herself. It was simply life forcing Jiyan to go. Her sensible look really made people feel sorry for her. Jiyan was so good. Why was her fate so tragic? Brother Shanji, are you listening? Tang Guo found that Mu Shanji was in a daze. She didn't know what he was thinking, so she pushed him. Mu Shanji came back to his senses. He pretended to be very tired and rubbed his forehead. What's the matter, Guo? Can we fly a kite tomorrow? Before they got married, Mu Shanji often flew kites with the original host. It was not that he wanted to play with the original host. At that time, the original host played with Tang Jiyan. Mu Shanji had an ulterior motive. After getting married, Mu Shanji seemed to have lost this function. He didn't want to fly a kite with Tang Guo. I'm afraid not. Isn't it enough to have father-in-law with Guo? Of course, Mu Shanji didn't want to go. If Jiyan heard about it, she would be sad again. There are a lot of things to do during the day tomorrow. It's all father-in-law's orders. If I fly a kite with you, I can't do anything. Otherwise, father-in-law will be unhappy and think that I'm useless. Let the maid and father-in-law accompany you tomorrow, okay? When I come back, I'll bring you the best shortbread. The original host liked to play and eat. Mu Shanji's words had indeed attracted her attention. She hurriedly agreed. Tang Guo was too lazy to deal with him. She just went through the process of setting up her character every day. After that, she washed up and went to bed with the help of the maidservants. Mu Shanji didn't dare to sleep in another room. He just lay on the side with his clothes on. It was really difficult for him. Late at night, Tang Guo saw that Mu Shanji had fallen asleep. She opened the window and the cold wind blew in. She pulled the quilt tightly and fell asleep comfortably, letting Mu Shanji be blown by the cold wind. Sure enough, when she woke up early in the morning, she saw that Mu Shanji's face was not very good. Dear host, there is actually a high risk of death for ancient people who catch a cold. He has the life of a cockroach. Don't worry, he definitely won't die. System, actually, he deserves it. He's always doing things to disgust Madam Host, so he got a cold. He deserves it. Mu Shanji had been coughing since the morning. Not long after he went out, his head started to heat up. He had no choice but to go back and ask the doctor to take a look. Everyone in the mansion was busy. Tang Guo pretended to be very worried. After a while, she saw Tang Jiyan come in. Tang Jiyan asked her, Sister Guo, I heard that cousin's husband caught a cold. Are you okay? Tang Guo didn't answer immediately. After all, she was a fool. She didn't even need to answer some questions. She only needed to stare at the other person in confusion. Naturally, Han would answer for her. Miss Tang is fine. It's just that the husband is seriously ill. The doctor said that he needs to rest in bed. We don't know when the fever will go away. The peak. Chapter 52-51. Because Mu Shanji had a cold and fever, he was worried that his illness would spread to Tanghua, so he was arranged to recuperate in another room. Tanghua was happy to do so. At this time, Mu Shanji had already fainted. If he knew, he would be very happy. Tang Jian was actually very anxious, but she couldn't go to see Mu Shanji's situation. She could only stay with Tanghua and talk to her about some incoherent things. She was very anxious when she saw that Tanghua didn't go to see Mu Shanji. Originally, she thought that if Tanghua went to see Mu Shanji, she could also go and see the situation. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to achieve her goal. But she didn't want to give up, so she took the initiative to ask. Sister Gua, how is my cousin-in-law now? Aren't you going to stay by his side? Tang Jian asked politely. Even Han didn't realize that something was wrong. Not to mention other things, in terms of shrewdness, there were few people of the same age who could compare with Tang Jian. If it was too complicated, the original owner couldn't understand. She could only look at the other person in confusion and ask Han for help. Every time this happened, Han was responsible for answering these questions. The minister is worried that Miss is sick, so he asked you to visit him after he recovers. There are people watching him, so he will be fine. Han replied. She thought that Tang Jian was just asking casually. Tang Jian was helpless. She said calmly, I didn't think of this at the moment. Sister Gua usually pays too much attention to my cousin-in-law. I forgot about this. Then I won't stay any longer. I have a lot of things to do today. She couldn't wait here, so she could only leave. As soon as she went out, Tang Jian asked someone to inquire about Mu Shanji's situation. She was relieved when she learned that Mu Shanji's mother was also waiting by his side. Then she called her confidant and asked him to find a way to get close to Mu Shanji. She couldn't be at ease if she didn't know the news about him. Unfortunately, this was the minister's mansion. She couldn't see him even if she wanted to. She was afraid that people would gossip if they knew. Mu Shanji had a fever for 2 days. His whole body was in a daze from the fever. Finally, he survived. The doctor also felt that it was strange. Logically speaking, it was so serious that he might not be able to survive. In the end, he blamed it on Mu's strong body. Young master, the doctor said that you might not make it. You really scared me to death. Mu Shanji stopped. How many days have I been sick? Young master, you've been feverish for 2 days, and you've lost consciousness due to the fever. Speaking of this, the servant looked around the room. At this moment, there were only him and Mu Shanji in the room. He took 2 steps forward and said in a low voice, Miss Tang is very worried about you. She has sent people to ask about you several times. In the past 2 days, you've lost a lot of weight. Because of this, you've lost a lot of appetite. Mu Shanji's heart ached when he heard that. Did you tell her that I woke up? Everyone in the residence knows about it. Young master, don't worry. Miss Tang even asked someone to send you some soup. She made it herself. The manservant Guele hurriedly opened the food box beside him. I told the others that this was bought from outside. Young master really missed it, so no one doubted it. Young master, please drink as much as you want. Mu Shanji held the bowl and was satisfied with Guele's cleverness. I will reward you later. Mu Shanji drank the chicken soup, and the image of Tang Jian appeared in his mind. When he was almost done, Tang Guo came with Han Er. Han Er was carrying a food box in her hand. Brother Shanji. Tang Guo pretended to be very happy and urged Han Er to take out the porridge that nourished the stomach. Father said to eat this. Mu Shanji was full from the chicken soup, and he didn't like porridge. He said, I don't have an appetite now. He rubbed his eyebrows. Gue Lu was very smart and quickly said, Miss Han Er, young master just woke up for a while and ate some soup that was bought outside. He should be tired now. Put down the porridge first and wait for young master to wake up before eating. Mu Shanji followed Gue Li's words and lay down. Han Er felt that Tang Guo was a little disappointed and comforted her. Miss, it's young master's body that hasn't recovered yet. He doesn't have any extra energy. He needs to rest and sleep more to recover. Oh. After Han Er comforted Tang Guo followed and left. She looked back and finally looked at Gue Li's face. Feed it to Brother Shanji. Gue Li hurriedly agreed. But after Tang Guo and Han Er left, Mu Shanji said, Gue Lu, you can eat that or throw it away. I'm already full. It's good that I haven't eaten yet. Gue Li took the porridge and ate it. He didn't expect it to be so salty. Digression. Mobile version website. Chapter 52. Gue Lu, what's wrong? Mu Shanji asked when he saw Gue Lu spit out the soup. He was still immersed in the sweetness of the soup that Tang Jian made for him and didn't notice that Gue Lu muttered, so salty. Gue Lu said with a bitter face, Young master, the soup is so salty. Salty? Mu Shanji was puzzled, did the chef put too much salt? If you can't finish it, throw it away. Do it secretly and don't let anyone see. Mu Shanji suddenly felt that this kind of careful life was not as free as chopping firewood in the mountains. Although he couldn't make much money in the past, at least he was free. He could go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted. If he didn't like to eat something, he wouldn't eat it. If he wanted to throw away something, he wasn't afraid of being found out. But now it was different. Since he lived in the mansion, he became careful. He was afraid that he would make his father-in-law angry. Mu Shanji looked at Gue Li's bitter face and felt a little relieved. It was much better than before. Buying Gue Li should be the right thing to do. However, it was obviously not enough to only have Gue Li as his confidant. He had to train a few more useful people so that he wouldn't have to be sneaky when pouring soup. Gue Li told Mu Shanji that he was going to throw away the soup. When he looked at the soup, his face was full of disgust. Ever since he had been with Mu Shanji, he had gained Mu Shanji's trust. He had never eaten anything so disgusting. Not long after, Gue Li returned to the room and whispered to Mu Shanji, Young master, when I went to return the food box, I heard from Han Er that the soup was made by the young miss. No wonder it was so salty. The young miss has never done any rough work. And that, it's not strange. Han Er is too much. Young master has just recovered and she let the young miss mess around. The reason why Gue Li dared to say this was because he knew that Mu Shanji didn't like Tang Guo. He didn't know the cause and effect of the mansion. Because Minister Tang was strict, the servants didn't dare to talk about Mu Shanji marrying into the family. They were giving him face. It could be said that many people in the Wuxian county were envious of Mu Shanji's good fortune. Gue Li took it for granted that Mu Shanji must have his own difficulties to marry into the family. Otherwise, he should have married the person he liked, his cousin. I see. Mu Shanji understood. Guo Er is father-in-law's only daughter. If she wants to do something, how can a maid like Han Er stop her? Mu Shanji was not touched by Tang Guo's soup. he only felt annoyed. Fortunately, he was full and did not try it. Otherwise, he would be the one to taste the salty soup. Then in the future, when young Miss sends soup over, I will help young master deal with it. Guelu said. After this, young master will have to rest for a while. Just now, I heard from Han that young Miss has been very interested in this area recently. She might even send him a few more times. Mu Shanji nodded casually. Sure, give me the book. Mu Shanji did not know that his every move was being monitored by the system. Originally, Tanghua asked the system to monitor this because she wanted to see Mu Shanji suffer. She didn't expect Tang Jian to care so much about him and let him eat until he was full. Hearing the conversation between Guelu and him, Tanghua didn't know what to say at this time. She really couldn't tell what kind of person this person was. Tomorrow, I will watch him drink. System, host, good job. Chapter 52-53. In the afternoon, Tanghua went to see Mu Shanji again. She couldn't say what she wanted to say in a hurry, at least on the surface. But Han had been by her side since she was young. On the way here, Tanghua said some words to her intermittently. Han already understood what Tanghua wanted to ask Mu Shanji. So, when she saw Tanghua staring at her, Han immediately said, "Young master, what Miss means is, do you like today's soup?" Earlier, I saw Guelu go to return the food box, and the soup inside was finished. Young master, you should like it, right? In order to make this soup, Miss woke up early in the morning and pestered the cook to teach her. It took her a few hours, and Miss was so tired that she was sweating profusely. Mu Shanji wanted to complain in his heart. After all, she had a precious body. She usually lived like a princess, and it took her so much effort to make a pot of salty soup that was inedible. But he did show a slight smile on his face. "I like it very much." "Thank you, Gua. He couldn't say that the soup wasn't good, and he didn't drink it at all, right? Tanghua saw Mu Shanji putting on an act and couldn't help but think that this person was very hypocritical. If it wasn't good, he could just say it directly. Her father wouldn't do anything if he knew. Her father was really not harsh. Ever since Mu Shanji came to the minister's mansion, her father had always been considerate of his self-esteem. He was so good to him, mostly because he wanted his daughter to live a good life, and hoped that Mu Shanji would not forget his original intention. Another part was because Mu Shanji was more outstanding, and he wanted to nurture him. But this Mu Shanji really didn't remember his kindness. Mu Shanji saw Tanghua's happy smile and felt that he didn't do anything wrong. Anyway, he only needed to say a few beautiful words to coax her. He won't drink the soup. Tanghua knew what he was thinking. She said, "Brother Shanji, there's more tomorrow." Mu Shanji's smile froze for a moment, then he smiled and said, "Gua, don't work too hard. Leave these things to the servants. I don't want you to be tired." "I'm not tired," Tanghua emphasized. She really didn't do anything. She was the one who directed the whole process, and the cook was operating. In the end, when the cook wasn't paying attention, she sprinkled a handful of salt in. She used the salt stored in the system space. In ancient times, salt was very precious. If a large amount of it suddenly disappeared, it would cause problems. Mu Shanji didn't want to deal with Tanghua, so he pretended to be tired. Guelu was smart and quickly found an excuse. After Hunter explained, Tanghua agreed to leave. In fact, she didn't like dealing with Mu Shanji. Now, she had to go through the process to pave the way for the future. That night, when they were having dinner, Squire Tang knew that Tanghua had made soup for Mu Shanji and praised her for her ability. Squire Tang went to see Mu Shanji and told him, "Gua said that she will make soup for you tomorrow. You don't have to refuse. It's rare for her to do something like this. If she likes to do it, just let her do it. She hopes that you can get better soon. If you don't get well, she will be sad. The reason why Squire Tang valued Mu Shanji so much was because of his daughter, Tang Guo. Mu Shanji could only agree. He felt a little helpless. The next day, Tang Guo made soup again. Of course, the cook was still doing it. She secretly added a handful of salt and then brought the soup to see Mu Shanji. She planned to watch him drink it. Chapter 52-54. Thank you for your hard work, Guo. You've been busy all morning. You should go and rest first. Mu Shanji looked at the steaming soup and was terrified. He didn't dare to try this soup. Gue Lu just told him that Jian would send him soup later. He could just eat what Jian made. Gue Lu took the soup enthusiastically and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Miss and Miss Han. The young master hasn't recovered yet. You should go and rest first. Otherwise, the residual illness will spread to your bodies. That would be bad. I'll take care of the young master." Logically speaking, Tang Guo and Han should leave after Gue Lu said that. However, Tang Guo knew what Mu Shanji was planning and decided to watch him eat. Other than the soup, there were other side dishes. She didn't do anything to the side dishes and she didn't order them to be made. "Brother Shanji, drink the soup." Mu Shanji's expression twisted for a moment. He wanted to say something, but Han understood what Tang Guo meant and said, "Miss probably wants to watch the young master eat. Recently, the young master is sick and Miss is very unhappy." Han was actually a little confused. She felt that Miss was becoming more and more difficult to understand. This might be why Miss was different from ordinary people. When she was in the room, she wasn't sad. However, when she came out, she wasn't happy. Maybe this was what others said about being touched by the scenery. Miss would only be sad when she saw someone and someone mentioned this matter. If she didn't see anyone and no one mentioned it, Miss's head couldn't hold so many things. Naturally, she wouldn't be sad. If possible, she hoped that Miss would forget about this matter and be happy every day. However, Miss liked the young master so much. She probably couldn't. She only hoped that the young master would get better soon. Mu Shanji was stared at by Han and Tang Guo. He couldn't get off the tiger. Gue Lu was scratching his ears and cheeks. He didn't expect that Tang Guo wanted to watch the young master drink soup today. He was just a servant. What he said before was still within his duty. It wasn't appropriate for him to interrupt now. If Minister Tang knew, he would definitely be taken to teach him the rules. At that time, he wouldn't be able to help the young master. Mu Shanji wanted to refuse, but he didn't know how to. He was regretting it now. Why did he praise Tang Guo's soup yesterday? Now, the whole mansion knew about it. If he said that it didn't taste good, who knows what the servants in this residence would say about him behind his back. What was worse was that Tang Guo was already scooping soup. She sat by the bed with a bowl and spoon and handed the spoon to his lips. "Eat. Eat." Han hurriedly said, "Son-in-law, just eat. If Miss doesn't feed you, she won't be satisfied." When Miss was sick when she was young, the squire also fed Miss like this. These things left a deep impression on her. I remember that the official was also sick. Miss fed him food, but he didn't eat. Miss cried and was angry with him. She ignored him for a few days. In fact, Han was reminding him out of kindness. She was afraid that Tang Guo would be angry later, and the whole mansion wouldn't be able to appease him. If this matter was blown out of proportion, it would have a bad impact on Mu Shanji. In the end, there were many people in the mansion. It was inevitable that one or two people would say something unpleasant. Mu Shanji had indeed thought of this. He opened his mouth with difficulty and drank the soup in the spoon. As soon as the soup entered his mouth, he wanted to spit it out. However, when he saw Tang Guo's serious and expectant expression, he swallowed it with tears in his eyes. His eyes fell on the side dishes. Peek. Chapter 52-55. Gue Lu wanted to give water to Mu Shanji, but he didn't dare to. He could only pick up some food for Mu Shanji. Mu Shanji's mouth finally felt better after eating normal food. Tang Guo pretended not to know and continued to feed Mu Shanji soup. Grabbing and grabbing. She didn't stop until she had fed him half a bowl. Only those who had eaten this kind of food could understand how Mu Shanji felt at this time. Seeing Tang Guo leave, he could finally vomit. Gue Lu hurriedly went to get water for him. After rinsing his mouth several times, Mu Shanji felt much better. At this time, he had a feeling that he didn't want to eat salt again in his life. Gue Lu, deal with these dishes. Mu Shanji said with difficulty. Gue Lu understood Mu Shanji's pain very well. He hurriedly took all the side dishes and soup to deal with. Fortunately, this was a small courtyard specially for Mu Shanji to recuperate. Next door was his study, so it was convenient for him to do these things without being discovered. In fact, Mu Shanji was hungry. He was looking forward to the food sent by Tang Jian. Because of the soup, he didn't want to eat the side dishes brought by Tang Guo before. Tang Guo was well aware of it. She didn't want to argue with him for the time being, but Mu Shanji couldn't eat the food cooked by Tang Jian for lunch today. She was now in Tang Jian's courtyard. She happened to see Tang Jian cooking and waiting by the stove with a covetous look. Tang Jian saw her like that and knew something was wrong. But she couldn't say anything. Her hand holding the spatula was trembling. Miss must be craving the food cooked by Miss Tang. Miss was busy the whole morning and only sent the food to Master and fed him soup. She didn't even have time to eat 2 mouthfuls. From the beginning, Minister Tang gave Tang Jian a quiet courtyard. She was in charge of this courtyard. Although it was not very big, it had everything she needed. These 2 days, she had been cooking secretly. When it was time to eat, she would go out to eat. She didn't expect that Tang Guo would come. She guessed that Tang Guo must have come to ask her to eat. She couldn't think of any other reason. As expected, Han Er explained, Miss just thought of Miss Tang, so she came over. She probably wants to have a meal with Miss Tang. It's almost time. I didn't expect Miss Tang to open fire here. Are you not coming over for dinner today? Actually, Han Er was asking on behalf of Tang Guo. She was a mentally challenged person, so she didn't react quickly and spoke intermittently. It was impossible to get a clear answer. League of Legends WXL. Tang Jian was smart and had already thought of an excuse. She said, it's just that I haven't done this in a long time, so I want to give it a try. Counting the time, there's only about half a year left before I get married. At this point, she believed that Han Er would not ask any more questions and should understand her meaning. As expected, Han Er's face was filled with realization, so it's like this. Then will Miss Tang be coming over for dinner today? Since Miss Tang is just trying to make it, there doesn't seem to be much here. There's only enough for one person. Since Miss Tang is hungry, why don't you bring the food over? If Guo Er doesn't mind, of course, there is no problem. I'm just trying to make it. I'm just afraid that it won't taste good, Tang Jian said, but she was a little upset in her heart. She really didn't expect that Tang Guo would come to her place. Miss Tang's cooking looks pretty good. Just now at the door, Miss Tang was attracted by the smell, Han explained. Han explained. She saw Tang Guo walk towards another boiler, her eyes staring at a small soup pot. She followed and smelled the fragrance in the soup pot. Before she could ask, Tang Jian said, "Since I'm cooking, I also made soup. I don't know how it tastes." Chapter 52-56. Of course, Han was praising her, but Tang Jian didn't appreciate it. She thought that she wouldn't be able to send the food over today. But when she remembered what Han said earlier, that Tang Guo had sent food to Mu Shanji and even fed him soup, she felt wronged. Wasn't it because someone had served him well? He didn't need a meal like hers. Thinking of this, Tang Jian straightforwardly ordered the servants to bring the soup and dishes over. In this regard, Tang Guo was very satisfied. Tang Jian's cooking was indeed good, even better than the chefs in the residence. She decided to call Tang Jian to eat every day. Grab and grab. On the other side, Mu Shanji waited and waited, but in the end, no one came. The hot soup and delicious dishes were waiting for him, but Gue Li's bitter face was the only thing that came. He saw that Gue Li's hands were empty and asked anxiously, "What's wrong? Did someone find out? If you meet someone, just tell them that you bought snacks from outside. Can't you do that?" "Young master, it's not like that. Something happened to the young miss today." "What happened to her?" Mu Shanji was anxious and couldn't care less about his hungry stomach. Gue Lu quickly explained the situation. Mu Shanji was relieved, "So that's the case. Then go out and buy some pastries." "Yes, young master." Gue Lu said and couldn't help but complain, "The young miss really knows how to make trouble. She made the young master unable to eat properly. What will we do if we are starving?" It was also because the system didn't keep an eye on them. After all, Mu Shanji wasn't a dangerous person. At most, he was a little disgusting. As a system, he didn't want to keep listening to what a disgusting person was doing. It would pollute his very pure system. Mu Shanji didn't blame Gue Lu, which meant that he agreed. If it wasn't for Tang Guo, he wouldn't even be able to eat. In the past, when they didn't live together, he didn't realize that the fool was so difficult to serve. Sometimes she was really annoying and easily made people lose their patience. Mu Shanji gradually forgot his original intention and neglected the kindness. He went from swearing that he would take care of Tang Guo for the rest of his life to thinking that the fool was really annoying. The guilt in his heart was gradually disappearing. Because he felt that the fool had ruined his plans, he thought that she was not good. The more he looked at her, the more he disliked her. Furthermore, marrying into her family still made him feel a little embarrassed. No matter how good Squire Tang was to him, he was still afraid of being judged by the servants. Except for Gue Lu, he didn't dare to order the others around. Especially after his recent illness, he was eager to cultivate his own confidence so that it would be easier for him to do things in the future and he wouldn't have to be afraid of anything. For the next few days, Tang Guo continued to deliver soup to Mu Shanji. She would only leave after watching him drink a few mouthfuls. After she left the room, she went to Tang Jian's place and dragged her to lunch. In the beginning, Tang Jian would cook for Mu Shanji secretly. Later, when she saw that Tang Guo went there every day, she simply stopped cooking. In the end, Mu Shanji had no choice but to eat the side dishes that Tang Guo had given him. Fortunately, there was not too much salt in the side dishes. At least, it was enough to fill his stomach. He originally wanted to rest for a few more days, but now he didn't dare to get sick again. He recovered in 2 days and finally didn't suffer anymore. After his body recovered, Tang Guo watched Mu Shanji leave the mansion. It was as if she saw a pig out of the cage. He was in such a good mood that even his footsteps were lighter. Now that Mu Shanji had recovered, she returned to normal. For the time being, she didn't care about Tang Jian's fiancé. She wasn't in a hurry. It wouldn't be too late to wait for Tang Jian to marry him. Tang Gua supported her chin and counted the days until Tang Jian's wedding. About half a year later, Tang Jian was about to get married. The Xia family had already sent the betrothal gifts to the mansion. Everyone in the mansion was jubilant. Only Tang Jian and Mu Shanji weren't happy. Looking at the red flowers, both of them felt very sad. Chapter 52-57. Tang Jian had to prepare for her marriage, so she couldn't be busy with the business. These things were temporarily handed over to her subordinates to take care of. Therefore, she had fewer opportunities to get along with Mu Shanji in private. As long as she was in the mansion, they couldn't be alone. Since she was preparing for her marriage, she hadn't taken the initiative to see Mu Shanji. The betrothal gift from the Xia family finally pulled her out of a dream. Mu Shanji was now her cousin-in-law, and she was about to marry someone else. The Xia family was located in Qingfeng County, which was not far from Wuxin County. The two were neighbors. If they rode fast, they could arrive there in 4 hours. Miss, Guile has been secretly coming to ask me these days. He said that your cousin-in-law has something to say. He came again today. Should I send him back? Tang Jian's thoughts were interrupted by her personal maid, Qin Yang. Qin Yang was her confidant and knew all her thoughts. She also felt very regretful. It was obvious that her miss and her husband were the ones who loved each other. Why did fate tease people like this? At first, she thought that her miss could break off the engagement and be together with her cousin-in-law. But because her cousin-in-law changed too quickly and her miss was a little angry, the two missed each other. Besides, her cousin-in-law was also a good person. It was a pity to be with a fool. Her cousin-in-law was quite talented. Now that he had become the son-in-law of the mansion, he was dragged down by the mansion and had no chance to take the imperial examinations. If the two could be together, her cousin-in-law might be able to study in peace and prepare to take the imperial examinations. Her miss could concentrate on managing the business. They were a good match. Miss Gua not only couldn't help her cousin-in-law, but also was a burden. She made people unhappy everywhere. Could a fool be understanding and get along with others? Anyway, Qin Yang felt that it was a loss for Mu Shanji to marry into the Tang family. Ask Guiluk if he has anything to say. I'm about to get married. It's not appropriate to see him again. Tang Jian supported her chin with her palm. Her beautiful face was full of sadness and sadness. It was a dream. I almost believed it. Ask Guiluk to pass a message to him. Just say that it's time to wake up from the dream. What can we do if we don't see each other? From now on, he'll be a good son-in-law, and I'll be someone else's wife. If we continue to be entangled, it won't be good for either of us. Tang Jian's smile was bleak. I'm afraid that he wouldn't dare to elope with me. What's the use of seeing me? Even if we meet, we won't be able to change the outcome. This was the reason why Tang Jian didn't want to see Mu Shanji. It was impossible between them. Mu Shanji obviously liked her and could be good to her, but he just didn't want to be with her. She had been dreaming for more than half a year and almost thought that it would come true. So what if Mu Shanji liked her? He was already bound by the minister's mansion, and she was about to be bound. She really wanted to ask him what he could say to her at this time. Could it be that he could change everything if he said it? If he really had the courage, a long time ago, he wouldn't have agreed to marry into the minister's manor. He would have confessed his feelings for her, and things wouldn't have come to this point. After listening to Gue Li's narration, Mu Shanji was dejected. Gue Li comforted him. Young master, don't be too sad. There was no room for redemption. Guele didn't know how to persuade him. Chapter 52-58. In fact, he was really partial to Miss Tang. Miss Tang was gentle and capable, generous and moving. When she stood with the young master, they were a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, fate played tricks on people. The young master became the family Tang's son-in-law. It was impossible for him to be with Miss Tang. He often heard some stories about the tragedy of lovers who couldn't be together. At this time, he saw a tragedy with his own eyes. Mu Shanji sighed, "You go first. I'll be alone. What about the thing I asked you to do before? I've found 2 people. They are still under observation. If there is no big problem, it should be fine." Mu Shanji couldn't look for people blatantly, so he asked Guele to help him. He found a few useful people and trained them to be his confidants. It was much more convenient for him to do things. Mu Shanji also wanted to see Tang Jian a few days later. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a chance. He knew in advance that Tang Guo was going to see Tang Jian. He pretended to accompany Tang Guo. Then he sat in Tang Jian's reception room openly. However, he couldn't go in. When Qin Yang served him tea, Mu Shanji asked in a low voice, "I haven't seen Jian these days. How is she?" "Master Tang, Miss Tang is fine. She is not very happy." Before Mu Shanji asked anything, Qin Yang trotted to find Tang Jian. At this time, Tang Guo was looking at the betrothal gifts in one of Tang Jian's rooms. She heard that Tang Jian was going to be a bride. As a fool, she was curious and came to have a look. Mainly because she found that Mu Shanji didn't have a chance to see Tang Jian recently. She reluctantly helped to let them see each other and deepened the impression that they were reluctant to part. If they could stand it, they would not do anything in the future. If they couldn't stand it, then it was their fate. When Qin Yang came in, Tang Guo was looking at the beautiful jewelry. It was shiny and very pleasing. Qin Yang didn't take Tang Guo seriously. In her opinion, Tang Guo was a fool who didn't know anything. Some questions had to be explained many times before the other party could understand. However, Han Er was standing beside Tang Guo, so she had to be more careful. She walked to Tang Jian's side and whispered in her ear that Mu Shanji had come. Tang Jian's expression froze for a moment. Her heart, which had been like a pool of stagnant water, started beating rapidly again. She smiled bitterly. In the end, she couldn't let go of that person. If the other party did not come, she could still avoid it. Since the other party was here, she really wanted to meet him. She gave Qin Yang a look and said, "I'm not feeling well. Qin Yang, you stay here and accompany cousin. If cousin likes anything, feel free to pick it. I want to rest for a while." After speaking to Qin Yang, she reminded Qin Yang, you have to take good care of cousin. Since Miss Tang isn't feeling well, then quickly go rest. Do you want a doctor to take your pulse? Han Er asked with concern. Tang Jian shook her head. No need. I'll be fine after some rest. It's probably because I didn't rest well last night. I'm a little dizzy. I'll be fine after some sleep. Han Er was just being polite. Tang Jian didn't look like there was a big problem, so she didn't ask more. Her main task was to serve her miss well. She didn't need to ask about other things. Tang Guo's back was facing Tang Jian. Listening to the other party's brisk footsteps, she could feel that she was a little anxious. Tang Jian went to see Mu Shanji. Tongzi, help me keep an eye on the 2 of them. See where they're going. Chapter 52-59. There was a bamboo forest behind Tang Jian's small courtyard. She went to the bamboo forest. Qin Yang was not the only maid she trusted. There was another one called Hong Yang, who had been serving her since she was a child. She bought the maid herself, so she could trust her completely. With Hong Yang guarding the door, she could meet Mu Shanji in the small bamboo forest. When the two met again, the distance between them seemed to have increased a lot. Mu Shanji really hated this feeling. He regretted agreeing to marry Squire Tang and Tanghua. Giving up a relationship was very different from what he had imagined. Not only could he not give up, but his mind was also full of Tang Jian. Thinking that she was about to get married, he seemed to go crazy. He looked at Tang Jian with bloodshot eyes and the first thing he said was, "Why don't you want to see me?" Tang Jian looked away and said softly, "So what if I see you? Can it change everything? I said a long time ago that we have missed the best chance. Now, you are my cousin-in-law, and I am about to get married." Mu Shanji was speechless. Yes, there was no ending between them. With his status, he was not even qualified to ask her not to get married. Xian. Tang Jian couldn't hold back her tears. Mu Shanji quickly wiped her tears, and then hugged her tightly. Tang Jian suddenly laughed, which made him very confused. "I thought you didn't have the courage to do such a thing. With this hug, I can get married in peace." Tang Jian did not push Mu Shanji away. At this time, she just wanted to hug him. When they left here, they would never be together. At this time, Hong Yang ran over quickly and interrupted the two's loving scene. She said anxiously, Miss Guo is here." The two quickly let go. Tang Jian asked in a panic, "Why is she here?" After asking, she knew that it was not the time to discuss this. She quickly looked around and planned to let Mu Shanji hide. There was only one way out. Tanghua did not know these things, but she had Hong Yang by her side. She could not be deceived. It was very unreasonable for Mu Shanji to appear here. Although it was a small bamboo forest, it was not connected to a mountain. It was surrounded by walls and there was no back door. The small bamboo forest was so small that Tang Jian did not know where to hide. "What should I do? What should I do?" Tang Jian looked at the high wall and suddenly said, "Can you go up? Should we go over from here?" Mu Shanji nodded. "I'll try. That's what I was thinking." Looking at the high wall, Mu Shanji was a little uncertain, but that was all he could do. In the past year, he hadn't done much rough work, and his body wasn't as flexible and durable as before. After exerting a great deal of strength, he finally reached the top of the wall. However, when he saw the other side, his scalp went numb. The other side was even higher than this side, and the ground was slightly sunken. If he were to jump down like this, he would probably be injured. "Shanji, what's wrong?" Tang Jian saw that Mu Shanji had not jumped and was very anxious. She had already heard the sound of footsteps coming from afar. "Hurry up and go over. Cousin, come over quickly. Han is most likely following her." Mu Shanji said, "It's too high. It's half as high as here. There's only grass below. It's very desolate here. I don't know what's inside." Tang Jian was anxious. At this time, Mu Shanji said, "I see a small protruding stone. It's temporary." Chapter 52-60. I'll stay on that small stone for a while. She should leave after playing for a while and come down later. Tang Jian watched Mu Shanji's figure disappear. He walked further away and stood on tiptoe. She could still see his hands grabbing the wall. She breathed a sigh of relief. The wall was so high that normal people would not look up and notice these details. Tanghua had already appeared in Tang Jian's line of sight. She had given Mu Shanji time to hide. Otherwise, he would have already come to catch her. Miss Tang. When Han saw Tang Jian, she was a little strange. Why are you here? Tang Jian said unhurriedly, I just lay down and felt a little stuffy, so I decided to relax here. She rubbed her temples. I don't know what's wrong with me recently, but I've been feeling flustered. Maybe I'm a little uneasy. Han understood, maybe you're a little uneasy because you're getting married. Why don't you call a doctor and prescribe some calming tea for you so that you can sleep better at night? Well, I'll try later. By the way, why are you here? Tang Jian changed the topic and tried to lead the two to the wall. This way, they could not see the top of the wall. She was afraid that if they were far away from the wall, they would be in a lot of trouble if someone saw them. Miss Tang wanted to walk around and accidentally came to this place. She must have remembered that she and Miss Tang liked to play here when they were young, so she insisted on coming here to have a look. She also said that she wanted to play with bamboo shoot worms. Tang Jian saw Tang Guo staring at her master and felt relieved. It turned out that she was looking for bamboo shoot worms. She did remember that she used to catch bamboo shoot worms here with Tang Guo when they were young. That was when she was very young. At that time, she was also a carefree young lady. Because her father often ran between the two places and her mother occasionally followed him, she was sent here to take care of them. Speaking of this yard, it used to be where her father lived before he got married. Later, before she moved in, her uncle had renovated it. Thinking of this, Tang Jian felt a little guilty. But then she thought that she and Mu Shanji did not have a happy ending. After today, she would not see him and would become someone else's wife. The guilt in her heart lessened a little. Tang Guo didn't know what Tang Jian was thinking. She squatted beside the bamboo and carefully looked for bamboo worms. At this time, it was indeed the season for bamboo shoot worms. Soon, she found one and reached out to grab it. When Han saw this, she was still a little worried that the bamboo shoot worm's sharp feet would hurt Tang Guo. However, she didn't dare to stop it as she was afraid that Tang Guo would be unhappy. Fortunately, Tang Guo grabbed the right spot, and the thing she was worried about did not happen. Tang Guo grabbed the bamboo shoot worm and went to Tang Jian. She handed it to Tang Jian. Tang Jian was stunned for a moment and did not take it. It wasn't that she had recalled anything. She didn't recall some of her childhood interests. Those were all for children to play with. His cousin wasn't a normal person, so it was normal for her to play these games. She had grown up and was no longer a child. In her opinion, these bugs were still a little ferocious, so she didn't want to catch them. There's only one. Cousin, you can play with it. Tang Jian's words were very beautiful. I'll watch you play. Hong Yang, go find 2 bamboo sticks and skewer the bamboo shoot worm for cousin. In a while, the bamboo shoot worm will fly. Hong Yang quickly went to do it and soon found a bamboo stick. Tang Guo skewered the bamboo shoot worm and sure enough, the bamboo shoot worm began to fly. Chapter 52-61. The bamboo shoot worm buzzed as it flew, but no matter how hard it tried, it couldn't get rid of the bamboo stick. She could only hold the bamboo stick and keep flying. Tang Jian looked at Tang Guo happily shaking the bamboo stick and felt a little envious. Although her cousin lost her mother when she was very young, she had a father who doted on her. Even if she was a fool, she could live a good life. That was why she could be so carefree. She had to shoulder everything by herself. Although her uncle treated her well, he was different from her father. Tang Guo shook the bamboo shoot worm in her hand and unconsciously walked to the foot of the wall. Tang Jian didn't notice that she put one of her palms on the wall. Her lips curved slightly, and then a stream of internal energy came out of her palms and went directly to the small stone that Mushanji was standing on. Mushanji felt that something was wrong, and then he grabbed the wall hard. As expected, the stone under his feet loosened and he fell down. The system gloated and reported to Tanghua. Host, Mushanji is now holding onto the wall with both hands. It looks like he's having a hard time, and he can't do anything else. He's probably having a hard time. Tanghua said, I'll hide here for a while. How can I just catch one bamboo shoot worm? She knew what was next door. It was also the place of the minister's mansion. However, no one lived there. It used to be a dye house. Later, Minister Tang felt that it wasn't good to set up the dye house at home. It was inconvenient to do anything, so he moved the place. There weren't many people in the family. The place was locked and no one even went in to clean it. The yard was full of grass. Why was the bottom of the wall so deep? Because it was originally a pond, a place used to store paint. How could it not be deep? Mushanji really knew how to choose a place to hide. Mushanji was in pain. Fortunately, he was used to doing rough work. He reacted in time and grabbed the wall hard. If it was an ordinary person, he would have fallen down. He really didn't expect that the stone would suddenly fall down. Thinking that this place was so desolate, it seemed reasonable. He looked up at the place where he grabbed the stone. Seeing that it didn't loosen, he was relieved. He was full of hope that Tanguo would hurry up and leave. But Han Er's voice came from the other side of the wall. His face turned green. Tanguo actually wanted to catch more bamboo shoot worms. Tang Jiyan didn't know about Mushanji's lightness, so she wasn't worried. In order to avoid being discovered, she didn't even look in that direction. Tanguo played in this place for less than an hour. The system told her that Mushanji was tired and sweating, but he was still persevering. Your stamina is not bad. Tanguo held 3 to 5 bamboo sticks in her left hand, which were full of flying bamboo shoot worms. She walked to the foot of the wall and gently pressed her palm against the wall. She circulated her internal force upward and suddenly loosened the place where Mushanji was holding. This time, Mushanji didn't even have time to react. He fell straight down and let out a muffled groan. Because of the buzzing sound of the bamboo shoots in Tangua's hand, no one noticed what happened over there. Moreover, there was grass growing next door, so falling down definitely wouldn't cause a loud bang. The commotion would be much smaller. Let's go back. Tanguo took the bamboo shoot worm and wobbled out of the small bamboo forest. Since the matter was done, she didn't want to stay here any longer. Tang Jiyan watched as Tanguo left. She was also relieved. It was good to get along with a fool, but also not good. It was easy to get rid of a fool, but also not easy to get rid of. For example, now, Mushanji didn't leave, but she couldn't chase him away. After all, this was not her home. She was just a temporary resident. Tang Jiyan thought of something and walked over to call Mushanji. Chapter 52-62. Shanji, Sister Tang has left. You can come down. However, there was no movement from there. Tang Jiyan shouted again. This time, she walked further away and looked at the wall. Only then did she realize that she couldn't see Mushanji's hand. She was anxious and quickly asked Hongyang to get the ladder. After getting the ladder, Hongyang climbed up and finally saw Mushanji, who had fallen into the pit. Mushanji's skin and flesh were relatively thick. He didn't faint from the fall, but his whole body was in a sorry state. He felt that his leg should be broken. Uncle, are you okay? Hongyang asked anxiously. She turned back and said to Tang Jiyan, Miss, Uncle should be weak. Our ladder isn't long enough to reach him. I think we have to find a rope. And I'm afraid that Uncle can't get out of here. It won't be good if someone sees him. Hong Yang, find me a rope. I'll go out from another place. Inform Guelu and tell him to prepare outside. If I'm not careful, people will be suspicious and implicate Jian. Mu Shanji endured the pain of his broken leg and was depressed. Tang Gua didn't come earlier or later, but at this time, she was clearly going against him. Ever since he got married, everything went wrong because of Tang Gua. It was impossible for him not to have some thoughts. Tang Jian could only be anxious on the ground. When she heard Hong Yang say that Mu Shanji had already gone out with a rope, Qing Yang, who was guarding outside, also came in, and Guelu had already gone out to help. Her panicked heart calmed down. I'm afraid this fall is not light. I think it's right. If he didn't agree to be the son-in-law, this wouldn't have happened. Hong Yang said angrily, if he had been with Miss earlier, these things wouldn't have happened. Now that they can't be together and can't let go, who will be unlucky if he isn't? If he had said something back then, Miss would have broken off the engagement with the Xie family. Tang Jian smiled bitterly. Yes, she had thought about it from the beginning. If Mu Shanji was willing, she could give up the marriage that was set since she was young. Even if people pointed at her, she would still be with Mu Shanji. Who would have thought that the end result would be like this? Not long after, Tang Gua heard someone report that when Mu Shanji came back from outside, he accidentally fell and broke his leg. Someone had already gone to get a doctor, but they still didn't know the exact situation. As soon as Tang Gua heard this, she pretended to be very anxious and hurriedly ran to see Mu Shanji. The original owner was obviously a fool, but when she heard that Mu Shanji was in trouble, she would always wake up a little. This was really strange. She was not in a hurry to see Mu Shanji's miserable state. When she arrived, Squire Tang was already there. He was frowning. Apparently, he was also worried about Mu Shanji. He was still questioning Guelu about what had happened. Guelu had always been good at making up stories. When he spoke, it was as if he had been there. Minister Tang didn't think much about it. Don't worry, young master will be fine. Guelu consoled. He was a little afraid. His young master looked a little haggard. Tang Gua also craned her neck to look inside, looking very anxious. The host was actually very obedient to Minister Tang. Squire Tang just said that Mu Shanji would be fine. Now that the doctor was bandaging his wound, she couldn't go in and disturb him. That would affect Mu Shanji. Of course, Tang Gua wouldn't rush in. After a long time, the doctor came out with a head full of sweat. Tang Gua quickly ran in. She really couldn't wait to see how miserable Mu Shanji was now. Chapter 52-63. Tang Gua went in and saw Mu Shanji with one leg and one hand wrapped up tightly. His face was covered with large and small scratches. Brother Shanji, does it hurt? System, Mu Shanji looks like he's in a lot of pain. He promises that the host's conscience won't hurt. She was the culprit, but she still pretended to ask Mu Shanji if he was in pain. She was really going to die. It doesn't hurt. I'm fine. Don't worry. Mu Shanji's answer was perfunctory, but no one paid attention to it at this time because his miserable condition attracted everyone's attention. Squire Tang was already asking the doctor about Mu Shanji's condition. Son-in-law's right leg and left hand were broken, but they've been reattached. There are other wounds and bruises on his body. It's not a light fall. As the saying goes, it takes 100 days for bones and tendons to heal. He needs to rest well for the next few months. Don't move around so as not to affect the recovery of his bones. The doctor stroked his beard. As long as he recuperates well, it won't affect him in the future. It's all thanks to son-in-law's good health. If it were someone else, I'm afraid he'd be half dead. Mu Shanji heard this and felt a little relieved. Fortunately, there were still some weeds growing in the fallen area. If he fell on a smooth and flat ground, it would be more serious. It took 100 days for bones and tendons to heal. He wouldn't be able to do anything for the next few months. He was suddenly afraid that Tang Guo would send him soup again. He decided to ask Guo later if he wanted to eat the food in the restaurant. His father-in-law would try his best to satisfy him. It's good that he can recover. I'll have to trouble you for the next few days. Squire Tang said politely and sent the doctor out. Tang Jiyan could come to see Mu Shanji openly after such a big matter. She was worried when she saw him in such a sorry state. But there were so many people here that she couldn't express her concern. She could only say a few words politely and let Mu Shanji recover well before leaving. I shouldn't have seen him. If I didn't see him, maybe he wouldn't have suffered today. Tang Jiyan said self-reproachfully when she returned to the room. It's all my fault. How can you blame Miss? If Miss Guo didn't come suddenly, this wouldn't have happened, Hong Yang said anxiously. Hong Yang said anxiously, isn't it because Miss Guo is being playful? If she wasn't playful, how could Tang's son-in-law fall down? Speaking of which, the young master is such a good person. Miss Guo will drag him down sooner or later. I really feel bad for him. Hong Yang continued, and even pulled Qing Yang to agree. Although Qing Yang did not say anything, it could be seen from her expression that she also thought the same. I'm gnawing on the bookshelf. Tang Jiyan did not express her opinion, but in her heart, she also felt that Tang Guo and Mu Shanji were not suitable for each other. It was not appropriate for her to say more. In fact, she was a little unwilling to accept it. It was because Tang Guo had a father who doted on her. Even if he was a fool, he could still marry Mu Shanji. She knew that Mu Shanji had married into her family largely because of her uncle's kindness to him. Why didn't she discover this earlier? If she did, Mu Shanji wouldn't owe her uncle a favor. Tang Jiyan couldn't visit Mu Shanji every day. Every few days, she would find an excuse to go with Tang Guo to check on Mu Shanji's recovery. When they met, the two of them would not talk much. Seeing that there were only a few days left until the wedding day, Tang Jiyan had countless regrets in her heart. Suddenly, she had a lot to say to Mu Shanji. But she couldn't stay any longer. In the end, she chose to send a letter to Mu Shanji. In the last few days, the two of them communicated through small notes. Chapter 52-64. Finally, it was the day of Tang Jiyan's wedding. Mu Shanji's health was much better. He couldn't walk for the sake of his health, but he could sit in a wooden wheelchair and be pushed around. On the morning of Tang Jiyan's wedding, he got up with the excuse of taking a breather. No one doubted that he had to attend such a big event. Tang Guo was right beside Mu Shanji. Everyone in the minister's mansion was waiting for the wedding procession. It didn't take long for the wedding procession to arrive. Even though young Master Xia was weak, he still came in person. After all, this was a marriage arranged by his parents. The woman had no intention of breaking off the engagement. It was impossible for him not to come on the day of the wedding. Compared to the other bridegrooms, who came on horseback, he came in a carriage and was helped off the carriage. It could be seen from his pale face that he was very weak. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him away. However, he was still very handsome, just that he was a little too thin for his face. Grabbing and grabbing. Even though he was wearing a red wedding dress, he didn't look very energetic. Only his eyes were exceptionally bright. They didn't look like the eyes of this body. In fact, with his physical condition, he wanted to break off the engagement. Even if he used his weak body as an excuse to break off the engagement, it would still affect the woman greatly. He was afraid that he would hurt her. If the other party took the initiative to break off the engagement, it wouldn't be a problem. However, the other party didn't seem to have that intention. His parents were very close to the other party's parents. Before his parents passed away, they told him to treat the girl of the family Tang well and not to bully her. In that case, if the other party didn't want to break off the engagement, then he would marry her. Anyway, he wouldn't live long. He would probably die in 2 years. At that time, his grandmother would make the decision to adopt a child from the clan under her name. She was very good at managing the business. It shouldn't be a problem for her to manage the Xia family's business. She could also let his grandmother enjoy her old age. It was better for her to take care of the parents' hard work than to be divided by the clan. Tang Jiyan's head was covered with a veil. She was helped out of the Tang family slowly. Squire Tang followed her out. His eyes were slightly red. After all, he had watched her grow up, so he was a little reluctant to part with her. Jiyan, if you feel wronged, you must ask someone to bring the news back. I will make the decision for you. No matter where you go, this is your home. Wonderful brush shop I am. Tang Jiyan, thank you, uncle. She thought that Counselor Tang was just being polite, so she didn't take it to heart and answered politely. Squire Tang was used to her being like this since she was young, so he didn't think much of it. After all, men and women were different. Even if Tang Jiyan was his niece, he couldn't get too close to her out of courtesy. Naturally, there were many things that he couldn't say. He could only ask the old maid to take care of Tang Jiyan. Tang Gua and Mu Shanji walked out. Mu Shanji's gaze fell on Tang Jiyan's back. His eyes were filled with reluctance, sadness, and helplessness. He regretted not having the courage back then. If he had the courage, Jiyan would not have married someone else. His gaze then fell on the young man in the red wedding dress. He was about the same age as him, but he was very thin and weak. He looked like a sickly person. Would Jiyan be happy in the future if she were to marry such a sickly man? If she went to the Xia family, would she be bullied? If this sickly man didn't live long, wouldn't Jiyan be a widow? The more Mu Shanji thought about it, the more regretful he felt. He couldn't wait to rush over and pull Tang Jiyan back. Fortunately, his leg and arm were broken now. Otherwise, he wouldn't know how to control himself. Chapter 52-65. Tang Guo looked at everything in front of her with a smile and cheered with everyone else. However, she caught a glimpse of Mu Shanji's pain and restraint. She almost couldn't help but roll her eyes. At this time, her eyes fell on Xie Rong. Xie Rong made a gesture of invitation, and Tang Jiyan was helped into the carriage that was arranged like a bridal sedan. After all, the journey was so long, and it was more stable to take a carriage. Sitting in a sedan chair was not comfortable, and it was very bumpy. It was also very tiring, and they had to walk a very long distance. The bride had already been sent into the carriage. Xie Rong stepped forward to greet Minister Tang and said a few words. To seize and seize Squire Tang expressed his gratitude this time. He hoped that Tang Jiyan could live well and that she would not be bullied in the Xie family. Xie Rong's reply was extremely brief. No. The reason he was able to come today was because the doctor had prescribed a few strong doses of medicine. After the wedding, he estimated that he would have to rest in bed for half a month. Unfortunately, he could not break off the engagement. Forget it, he might as well stay in the Xia family and let her live a carefree life. Before he got married, he had asked someone to inquire about Tang Jiyan. She didn't seem to be someone who would be entangled in love. Instead, she was shrewd and efficient in managing the business. She shouldn't be the kind of woman who would stay at home peacefully. Yunxian Pavilion. As the saying goes, where there are gains, there are losses. When he was gone, as long as she treated his grandmother well, so what if the Xia family's assets were all hers? She couldn't bring it with her when she was born and couldn't bring it with her when she died. Seeing Xia Rong's sincerity, Minister Tang finally let him go. When Xia Rong turned around, he suddenly felt a gaze on him. He subconsciously turned around and saw Tang Guo looking at him. He didn't know why, but the moment he saw Tang Guo, he felt slightly uncomfortable. He didn't want to go through the formalities of getting married. He quickened his pace and was helped into the carriage. When he finally sat down, he let out a long sigh and pressed his hand to his chest. Seeing this, the manservant who served him became worried. Is young master not feeling well? The servant's eyes turned red. The doctor has already said that young master's body cannot be tormented. Look, he can't take it anymore. Xia Rong picked up the folding fan beside him and knocked it on the manservant's head. Today is a joyous day, so don't speak nonsense. My parents have told me to give the family Tang girl some face. If I didn't come here personally today, how would others see her in the future? In the future, when I'm gone, she won't be able to establish herself in the Xia family. I'm afraid that the people from the Xia family will join forces to bully her. At that time, my parents' property will probably be swallowed up by them. Grandma is old, and I don't want her to worry and tire herself out. Everyone in the clan is so mean, I'm afraid she'll die from anger. Miss Tang is very good at taking care of these things. Today, I have given them enough face so that the people of the clan will not dare to look down on me. In the future, even if I am not around, no one will be able to take advantage of me. If his body was in good condition, he might be able to think of a way to stop this marriage. If he really had to think of a way, he could think of 100 ways. However, his body wasn't in good condition, and he didn't have the time or energy to do that, so he might as well just leave it at that. Even if he were to hand over the Xia family's property to an outsider, he was not willing to let the people from the main family take advantage of him. Young master, are you really all right? Don't scare me. It's fine, you'd better be quiet. If you continue to make noise, I can't guarantee that there won't be any problems with my body. Xia Rong's words really made the manservant shut up. He was afraid that if he were to disturb Xia Rong, something would really happen to him. If that happened, this wedding would become a tragedy. Chapter 52-66. I thought you were sick when you clutched your chest. For Season said worriedly, it's good that you're fine. What happened to you just now? Nothing, I'll rest for a while. Xia Rong closed his eyes. For Seasons didn't say anything else. Looking at Xia Rong's pale skin, he was really worried that he wouldn't be able to serve by his side one day. Xia Rong didn't actually fall asleep. His mind was replaying the strange scene just now. It was his first time seeing it, but he couldn't ignore it. Who's the young woman standing next to Minister Tang? And who was the man sitting in the wooden wheelchair? Did you forget? That woman is Minister Tang's only daughter, Tang Guo. Because she stayed in her mother's womb for too long, she's a bit dumb. That man is Minister Tang's son-in-law. I heard that he accidentally fell a while ago. It's quite serious, breaking his leg and arm. He'll need a few months to recover. I've told you about this before. I didn't pay much attention to this. I don't like to care about other people's family matters. For Season said, then you're asking about it today. Since I've seen him, I naturally have to ask. We're already in-laws, so there'll be a lot of interactions in the future. However, why would he feel regret in his heart? Luckily, he was a short-lived ghost. The doctor said he only had a few years left, so he didn't need to worry about these things. This time, Xie Rong really didn't want to think about it. He emptied his mind and closed his eyes to rest. The wedding procession slowly set off from Wuxian County, heading towards Qingfeng County. Along the way, the procession was very lively. There were also many onlookers along the streets. Tang Xian heard Hong Yang's reminder that they had already left Wuxian County. Her lively heart finally calmed down. That illusory dream was still a dream. It was shattered. But when she thought about spending the rest of her life with someone else, she felt terrible. She heard Hong Yang whisper to her that young Master Xie's body wasn't very good. Tang Xian thought that if he was really bad, he wouldn't have come to fetch the bride. She hoped that his body wasn't very good. That way, they might not even have the wedding night. A person with a weak body shouldn't be able to do that, right? The carriage traveled slowly, and it took nearly half a day to reach the Xie family's gate in Qingfeng County. Next was a series of procedures such as the wedding ceremony. Old Madame Xie smiled, but she was still a little worried when she saw Xie Rong. She was even more worried. In fact, she had already accepted her fate. She knew that her grandson did not have many years left to live, so she would cooperate with whatever he wanted to do. The heavens were too unfair to her Xie family. They had clearly done nothing wrong, but people kept disappearing one after another. Seeing that her only grandson didn't have many years left to live, she wondered if she had sinned in her previous life to receive such a punishment in this life. "Grandma," Xie Rong called out. He realized that the other party was distracted. She was most likely thinking about something unhappy. "It's good that you're married. I hope this marriage will make your body better." Xie Rong shook his head and held old Madame Xie's hand. He whispered, "Grandma, this is fate. Even the doctors can't cure it. How can you expect a wedding to change it?" Old Madame Xie immediately understood what Xie Rong meant. She sighed, "Today is your big day. Don't mention those unhappy things. Don't worry, I won't blame the family Tang girl. I'm not old and muddle-headed. Your body isn't good. She'll be at a disadvantage if she marries you." Peak. Chapter 52-67. "Miss, what are you doing?" Qin Yang and Hong Yang chased the others out of the room and asked them to wait outside. They felt that it was better to be strong so that their miss would not be bullied. The Xie family was considered a big family. Although they started at the same level, because of the accident of the master, the development of the family was lagging behind the Xie family. Only when their miss was strong, the Xie family would not look down on her. They, as dowry maids, had to protect their miss at all times. The reason why Hong Yang suddenly asked was that Tang Xian had drugged the wine. Her face was full of shock. Did her miss want to poison the young master of the Xie family on the wedding night? At this time, she was a little confused. Even if her miss did not like the young master of the Xie family, there was no need to poison him. Tang Xian shook the wine pot and looked at the two shocked and hesitant faces. She shook her head. "You misunderstood. I didn't want to poison him. This drug can only make him more unconscious." She had prepared this drug in advance for the wedding night. On the second day, she would find other excuses. If she found more excuses like this, the other party would not be interested. Anyway, she did not rely on the Xie family to live. If the other party was sensible, he would not have such thoughts again and they could live in peace. She did not stop him from taking concubines. As long as they did not disturb her, he could take as many concubines as he wanted. "Qin Yang, I see. I was almost scared to death just now. Since Miss still can't forget the young master, why didn't you break off the engagement?" Hong Yang did not understand. I don't think the Xia family is harsh. If Miss breaks off the engagement, the other party can't force you to marry. I can't forget him. If I break off the engagement, can I be with him? Tang Xian said, or will we meet secretly like before and finally take that step one day? Since there is no future, it is better to stay far away. Out of sight, out of mind, you can live a peaceful life. After a long time, some memories will gradually fade, and you will not be as troubled as now. It was not that she could not break off the engagement, but she did not think it was necessary. Mu Shanji did not become the son-in-law. She had an idea to break off the engagement. Why bother now? Now that they were married, it was much easier for her to reject someone she did not like than to reject Mu Shanji. Presumably, a normal man would not have any other thoughts after being rejected by her 2 or 3 times. She had never thought about anything in the Xia family. As long as she was not disturbed, she would be fine. She had found a place where she could die of old age. Fortunately, there are still the 2 of you. In the future, you will have to pay more attention to the businesses in Wuxin County. Go and take a look often. Miss, aren't you going over? Tiredness appeared on Tang Xian's face. Don't go if you can. Don't worry too much. The 3 of them chatted for a while before someone announced that Xie Rong had arrived. Tang Xian was prepared for this and did not panic at all. What she didn't know was that Xie Rong had prepared for this. He had hidden some powder under his fingernails. It wasn't for Tang Xian, but for himself. He would become very weak in a moment, and Tang Xian would understand that he was a man who didn't have long to live. But he never thought that things would be different from what he had expected. Xie Rong entered the room and went through the formalities. He lifted the red veil and poured 2 glasses of wine. Then, he raised his glass and toasted with Tang Xian. Tang Xian picked up the glass and used her sleeve to cover her mouth. In fact, she was pouring the wine into her clothes and then put the glass down. Xie Rong, on the other hand, dipped his fingernail into the wine and drank it. The peak. Chapter 52-68. When he came, he had already told 4 Seasons to come in and pick him up as soon as he heard the noise. Grab and seize. However, after he drank the wine, he felt dizzy and then sat down with the help of a stool. He thought to himself that he had used a strong medicine to welcome the bride. Did it cause a lot of damage to his body? It was just a medicine that made his body weak, but he was about to faint. Just as he thought about it, Xie Rong fainted. Tang Xian sighed in relief and said to Qing Yang and Hong Yang, "Put a quilt on the floor and put him there." At this time, Tang Xian didn't notice that Xie Rong's face was very pale. Qing Yang and Hong Yang felt something was wrong and quickly told Tang Xian. Not only that, Xie Rong's hands were cold and his forehead was sweating. They were afraid. Tang Xian didn't expect it to be like this. Now, she didn't dare to delay and quickly called people in. 4 Seasons had been waiting outside. When he heard the noise, he quickly came in. Seeing Xie Rong unconscious, he was scared out of his wits. The young master was too cruel to himself. He couldn't bear it. He quickly helped him to the bed and shouted for the people outside to call the doctor. "Young madam, the young master's body has always been weak. He must be too tired today. Please forgive him." Tang Xian heard 4 Seasons' words and her heartbeat gradually calmed down. 4 Seasons didn't seem to suspect anything. Was it because Xie Rong's body had always been weak? It was because of the strange books. In this case, nothing would happen between them in the future. At this time, she wasn't worried about Xie Rong. Instead, she was relaxed. Wasn't this exactly what she wanted? 3 doctors came in with big medicine boxes. Except for 4 seasons, the others were driven out of the room. Tang Jiyan saw that she had nothing to do and was very cooperative. Her understanding appearance made the Xia family have a good impression of her. They felt that they had married the right young madam. When the doctors were diagnosing, 4 seasons whispered, the young master took some medicine himself. The doctors were Xia Rong's confidants. When they heard that, they knew that the young master was messing around again. With 4 seasons, it was not strange that the doctors diagnosed that Xia Rong took medicine. They even took the initiative to hide it and operated on Xia Rong. Fortunately, they came in time and Xia Rong was fine. The main thing was that he used too much medicine 2 days ago. It hurt his vitality. He had to stay in bed for a month. His body was weaker than before. 4 seasons felt terrible. Xia Rong was sent back to his room in the middle of the night. 4 seasons explained the situation to Tang Jiyan. After Tang Jiyan heard about it, she pretended that she was fine and told Xia Rong to recuperate. Young miss, this is great. Young Master Xia can't do that at all. Young miss, you don't need to avoid him in the future. Hong Yang could not help but feel happy. Previously, I felt that this young Master Xia's complexion did not look like a normal person. So it turns out that he was weak and sickly since young, and could only stay in the house to recuperate. The two who knew Tang Jiyan's thoughts were glad. This way, their young madam didn't have to deal with too much. If Xia Rong was gone in the future, their young madam would be more relaxed. Chapter 52-69. Dear host, Xia Rong is really pitiful. Not only did he take drugs, but he was also drugged by Tang Jiyan. This time, he has to recuperate for at least a month. The doctor said that his vitality was damaged and his lifespan will be shortened again. The system sighed. Tang Jiyan's 2 personal maids almost clapped their hands and cursed Xia Rong to die early. Look at how happy they are. Fortunately, dear host is willing to lend a helping hand. Otherwise, the Xia family will fall into Tang Jiyan's hands for nothing. Oh yes, dear host, when are you going to act? Now that Tang Jiyan is married, it should be about time, right? If this drags on, I'm afraid that Xia Rong won't be able to hold on. There's also old Madam Xia. We have to take precautions so that she doesn't get a boxed meal early. This old lady is still useful. If Tang Jiyan does something stupid, we can't avoid letting this old lady deal with it. Tongzi, you seem to be in a hurry. I'm not in a hurry. I just feel that it's about time. Speaking of which, the Xia family is not bad. It reminds me of dear host. You're also very unlucky. Tang Gua did not expect the system to be in such a hurry. It put itself in her shoes. I'm not unlucky now. It can't erase the times when dear host was unlucky. Now that I think about it, I don't know how those days went by. The system recalled. I should say that it's really not easy for dear host to hold on until now. In the past, I was useless except for being a burden. Why are you sighing today? It's because that guy from 978 sent me an email. That guy is really lucky. Other than being bound to an unreliable host at the beginning, he was bound to a good host after meeting us. Now, he's doing missions happily. That guy even showed off to me. Just looking at him makes me angry. The system gritted its teeth. Forget about that. Who doesn't want to show off? The most despicable thing about him is that he actually asked about my past. How can I tell him about my dark history? Wouldn't that make me lose all my dignity? Tang Gua finally understood. She was wondering why Tongzi was so talkative today. It turned out that someone had touched his sore spot. There were 2 things that Tongzi could not mention. One was the serial number, and the other was the past. The past is the past. At that time, you weren't the only one who was confused. I was also confused. That was a period of growth. There's no need to discuss who was right and who was wrong. Dear host, have you ever been curious about your past? Why were they sent to the small world to do missions? When will it end? Of course I'm curious. What's the matter? Did you find out something again? I really can't hide anything from you. Recently, I've heard a lot of gossip in the system home. Because I know a lot of veteran systems, they know more. There is a legend that I don't know if it has anything to do with you. Tell me about it. Chapter 5270. After developing the system, there are still people who need to experiment. It is said that there were a total of 5 systems in the beginning. Their code names are metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Those who are willing to do this experiment are also taking a big risk. It is said that among the 5 systems, only gold was successfully fed back. The other 4 systems have lost contact. They might have been scrapped. What do you mean? I don't think I'm one of those systems that destroy luck. Maybe I'm one of the wood, water, fire, and earth systems that disappeared. You were one of the systems that was bound to do the experiment. Did something happen to you? I remember you said that you have some memories of the time control department. You said that you saw a woman come out from there. Does that person look like me? She doesn't look like you. Forget it. Whether it is or not, we'll know in the future. Why bother so much? When those lights are lit up, we might be able to get out. Oh right, what happened to the system gold that was fed back? He got lost with the boss of the time control department. He is the boss's personal system. He is very powerful. I don't know when we can meet. The signal sent back by the system gold is very weak. It is probably very far from here. I can't see the details. I can only feel that they are alive. Keep an eye on the Xie family. I'm going to do something. Tang Guo was thinking about how to create an opportunity to let Xie Rong live and let Tang Jian go back to Wuxian County without hesitation. In fact, if Tang Jian didn't go back to Wuxian County, it would be the same for Mu Shanji to go to Qingfeng County. Tang Guo didn't care about this anymore. The main thing now was to get rid of Xie Rong so that his existence wouldn't hinder their development. Tang Guo took out a paper puppet. She wanted to find a chance to release a paper puppet. She had already thought about it. If Xie Rong's life was uncertain, everyone would think that he had no chance of survival. If they didn't see his body, it wouldn't be strange when they went back. The Xie family's business was quite big. There were often merchant ships that delivered goods by sea. As long as Xie Rong's ship capsized, they could get him to another place. The next day, Tang Guo went out to fly a kite. She found a chance and took out a paper puppet. She dripped her blood into it and turned it into an old man. It looked like an immortal. This was a paper puppet that was relatively powerful. Although the small world had restrictions, it was still easy for it to overturn a boat. You can come up with a name yourself. Make it sound like an otherworldly expert. Tang Guo was sitting cross-legged on the grass. She was too lazy to give it a name. A mature paper puppet needed to learn how to name itself. The white-haired old man was speechless. Master, you are so lazy. Once the matter is settled, you will be free. You can go wherever you want. When the white-haired old man heard this, a hint of joy appeared on his face. He was made from Tang Guo's blood and was meticulously refined by Qi Shao, so he was born with intelligence. Of course, he knew that being a human had many benefits. Master, please give your orders. In 2 months, create an opportunity for Xie Rong to go out to sea. Then, capsize his ship and trap him on the island. Treat him and nurse his body back to health. Then, wait for my notice. As for the people accompanying him, just sweep them all ashore. Tang Gua said and took out a wooden box. There were thick medical books inside, as well as some prescriptions and silver coins. Paper puppets were born with intelligence, so it was easy for them to learn these things. Vertex. Chapter 52-71. Understood, Master. The white-haired old man carried the medicine box on his back and said goodbye to Tang Gua. Then, he tapped his feet lightly and flew into the distance. After a while, the white-haired old man came back. He came back to tell Tang Gua his name. Master, I'll be called Lao Bai from now on. Tang Gua was speechless. Where did he learn this naming skill from? Lao Bai doesn't sound like a fairy and is a little funny. Are you sure? Tang Gua asked hesitantly. The white-haired old man thought for a while. What about Bai Mei? No, that's a little evil. It's not suitable for you. The white-haired old man thought again. Bai Mei. How about Lao Bai? The real name of the expert is not important. If someone asks, you can say that you're old and you've forgotten your name. You only remember that people call you Lao Bai. Lao Bai nodded. Master, you're the best. Then I'll be called Lao Bai. It's not you who's called Lao Bai. It's the people who call you Lao Bai, Tang Gua corrected. Lao Bai said, understood. Master, I'll leave first. I'll go find an island. Wait. After you kidnap him, be polite to him. Prepare the daily necessities in advance. He's the son of a rich family. His living conditions can't be too poor. Lao Bai expressed his understanding. When I find a place, I'll go buy some things. Actually, I also want to live comfortably. It's better to have everything. As for earning money, the paper puppet didn't have to worry about that. Once it thoroughly studied the medical book given by its master, it would soon have a lot of money. By then, it would build a celestial house on the island and live a comfortable life. It would also hire a few children to work for it and plant some flowers and fruit trees. It would be a paradise on earth. I feel that the paper puppet this time is much more lively than before. It should be because Brother Qi Zhao's refining skills have improved. Even if their strength is suppressed by the small world, I can still feel that they're getting more lively. System, if that's the case, then it's too unlucky. Tang Gua didn't deny it. It was indeed that person. The reason why she didn't announce it was because he actually went through the process of getting married. She just wanted to see how far he would go. After the system's observation, she found out Xie Rong's thoughts. Just as the system had said, the other party was indeed unlucky. Xie Rong's thoughts were similar to her father's. They both hoped that there would be someone capable who could take over the family business and take care of the person they cared about the most. This was especially true for Xie Rong, who had deliberately fed him medicine for this reason. He was ruthless enough. Most likely, he felt that he could not live anymore and wanted to do something for the last time. It could be said that the heavens were jealous of geniuses. But unexpectedly, these two people would only let them down. In the Xia family, Xie Rong was recuperating in his room and did not go to see Tang Jian. Old Madame Xia treated Tang Jian well and even felt that she had mistreated her. She had already given the right to manage the house to Tang Jian. In other words, she was the mistress of the house and the Xia family could only give her this much. Cuckoo Xie Rong had discussed it with her. After he left in a few years, he told her not to hold Tang Jian back. If she wanted to, she could find a husband for herself. Old Madame Xia had also gotten over it. Tang Jiyan was a good person and it was fine for her to find a husband. Perhaps an old woman like her wouldn't live to that day. Tang Jiyan could do whatever she wanted with this huge family fortune. She could find a husband or get married as long as the husband was not a member of the Xia family. Tang Jiyan found that she was very comfortable in the Xia family. She didn't know if Xie Rong knew about her situation, but he didn't come to see her even once. She felt that he was embarrassed that day and didn't dare to appear in front of her. Since that was the case, she couldn't be bothered to disturb him. She just arranged for someone to check on him regularly. Unknowingly, 3 months had passed and Xie Rong's body was much better. He had to go out in 2 days and mentioned this at the dinner table. Old Madame Xia was very worried and didn't allow it at first. But knowing Xie Rong's temperament, she could only take a step back and let Tang Jiyan go with him. Tang Jiyan didn't refuse. Old Madame Xia treated her well and this was a small matter. Chapter 52-72. 2 days later, Xie Rong took Tang Jiyan out to see what was going on with the goods that were detained on the waterway. Tang Jiyan came to the door early in the morning. She was a little reluctant. Yesterday, she asked around and found out that it would take at least 3 to 5 days to get to that place. Wouldn't she have to ride in the same carriage with that sickly man for so many days? Plus, it was really difficult to go back and forth. Originally, she thought that if they spent more time together, she might be able to forget Mu Shanji and accept Xie Rong. Now she realized that it was impossible. She had no feelings for Xie Rong at all. Instead, she still couldn't forget Mu Shanji even after being married for so many days. She waited at the door for a while before she saw Xie Rong, who was late. He was supported by 2 coachmen on his left and right. He walked slowly. When he walked fast, his face was red and he was out of breath, as if he would die at any time. Seeing this, she couldn't help but think of Mu Shanji. Mu Shanji used to be a woodcutter and had a good body. He was not like Xie Rong, who was even weaker than a lady from a noble family. Hearing Xie Rong's uncontrollable coughs and the coachman beside him, Tang Jiyan felt that he didn't have many years to live. The Xia family had few people and there was no trouble in the branch family. It was probably the Xia clan that was difficult to deal with. She wasn't afraid. As long as the old madam was on her side, the Xia clan wouldn't dare to do anything to her. Thinking of this, Tang Jiyan felt that there was no harm in running around with Xie Rong. She could be more familiar with the family business in the future. She could show some of her talents in advance and leave an impression on the people below. It would be easier to manage in the future. Xie Rong didn't know that Tang Jiyan was thinking about what would happen after his death. Seeing her waiting at the door, he said faintly, "I asked someone to arrange a carriage for you. I've been sick for a long time and I don't want my illness to spread to you." Tang Jiyan was happy. She thought that Xie Rong knew about his condition. He had embarrassed himself before and didn't want to stay with her. "Let's go." Xie Rong didn't pay much attention to Tang Jiyan. He took her with him just to reassure the old madam. He wasn't a fool. He could see that Tang Jiyan didn't care about him. This was exactly what he wanted. He got into the carriage and closed his eyes to rest. Recently, his body was getting worse and worse. Last time, he had a hard time and he suspected that his life had shortened again. I wonder if young mistress will be sad if young master is like this. Actually, young mistress is a good person. For Season suddenly said, if Sir didn't have these illnesses, he would be a good match for young madam. Perhaps they could be in love for the rest of their lives. Cough, cough, cough. Xie Rong choked on 4 Seasons' words. He opened his eyes and glanced at him. Why would you think that? If I had not been ill, this marriage would not have been possible. I have no interest in her and she has no interest in me. Instead, we are enemies. He had long seen that Tang Jian had no interest in him, and she probably had someone else in her heart. He hadn't been able to investigate this matter in the beginning. If he had known, he would have destroyed this marriage. Young master doesn't like young madam. GC didn't quite understand. Young madam was so good. She had only been married for a few months, but she had already taken care of everything in the residence. Don't worry about it. Xie Rong didn't want to talk about this. His bright eyes dimmed a little. He was a person who was about to die. Why should he think so much? Four Seasons immediately shut up, not asking any more questions. Since young master didn't like young madam, he naturally wouldn't mention it. Well, with young master's appearance, how could he care about love? Chapter 52-73. Four Seasons. Young master, I'm here. Xie Rong's sudden voice made Four Seasons flustered. He was afraid that one day the young master would no longer call him Four Seasons. If that day really comes, you must take good care of grandmother. Young mistress is good to grandmother and gave her the Xia family's business. If you don't respect grandmother, help me to disperse the family business and let grandmother live a comfortable life. Four Seasons' face was sad, but he quickly agreed, young mistress is so good, how can I not respect old madam? Xie Rong did not answer. He was not sure, but he was prepared in case something happened and Four Seasons could not deal with it. Tang Jian's carriage was accompanied by Hong Yang. Qin Yang stayed in the residence to take care of other things. Hong Yang was also discussing Xie Rong. Young master doesn't look very energetic, I guess he doesn't have much time left. Don't say this in front of outsiders. I can't help you when the time comes. You've seen how much the Xie family treasures young master. Young mistress, don't worry. I'll tell you what I know. I won't say it in front of outsiders. Speaking of which, the Xie family is simple, not as complicated as we thought. I don't know if God is helping young mistress, but he directly arranged a sick person for you. Tang Jian's expression was indifferent, and she did not answer this question. Young mistress, do you still think that young master is here? Hong Yang suddenly asked and shook her head, what a pity. Young mistress Gua is stupid, not sick. Young mistress and young master are not fated to be together. It's sad to think about it. When young mistress got married that day, I saw young master's eyes were red, and his hands were holding the wooden wheelchair's armrest. It can be seen that he doesn't want young mistress to get married. Tang Jian finally could not help but say, he doesn't want to, but he doesn't dare to stop it. Even if he does, it's useless. At most, the two of us will be disgraced and spurned by others. A few days later, Xie Rong finally got on the boat. Did you find out what happened? Young master, I heard that all the boats that went there can't return. Those who came back to report it all came back with logs. Fortunately, it's not too far away. Otherwise, I don't know what to do. Four Seasons said, a few days ago, there were people talking about supernatural powers. 2 days ago, a person dressed as a Taoist asked who the ship that was trapped belonged to. Our people replied that it was the Xie family. Then, the Taoist priest said that this matter could only be resolved if the Xie family's head went over. What happened next is something that young master knows. Four Seasons added, I don't know what's going on, but young master has to go. What if there's some danger? Young master even hid this matter from old madam. Didn't I leave young madam on the shore? Then, young master's previous words show that he doesn't trust her too much. That's right, they've only been married for a few months, and they haven't even seen each other that many times. How could there be feelings between them? Now that I think about it carefully, although young Madam arranged everything in an orderly manner, she didn't really care about young Master's life and death. Instead, she didn't seem to care about young Master's existence. For seasons complained that he insisted on following. He was not the only trusted aide of the young Master. He had to be by the young Master's side at all times. Even if something happened, the others would do as the young Master instructed. I'm afraid that grandmother will be angry if she knows that I'm risking my life. I'm also very curious about what kind of supernatural power is stopping my cargo ship, and I have to solve it. Thinking of this, Sierra stood at the bow of the boat and could already see the cargo ship. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.